Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of August 25th. By way of introduction, we are the Planning Commission. We are a group of volunteers in town who have been appointed by the Town Council to make land use decisions. We make our decisions based on the existing codes and ordinances of the town that are set by the Town Council. If you're new to our meeting, if you would like to speak, there are speaker cards in front of you, and there should be pencils out there. We ask that you fill out your name and which agenda item you wish to speak on. The agendas are out there as well, and you can indicate which number, or if you wish to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, you can do so under verbal communications. And we ask that if you have cell phones, if you'd please silence them at this time. Okay, so let's get started with the roll call.
Commissioner O'Donnell. Here. Commissioner Machichi.
Here.
Commissioner Talasford. Here. Commissioner Sayoc. Here. Chair Bourgeois.
Here.
And Erickson and Jensen have an excused absent.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. If everyone please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda is approval of the minutes of August 11th. So if anyone has any comments, changes, recommendations, or a motion, please let me know. Commissioner Talasford.
Yeah, I moved that we approve the minutes of August 11th, 2010.
Anybody second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Sayoc. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of August 11th. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next item on tonight's agenda is written communications. I should note that we have 2 desk items, and the desk items available to the public out here. We have a desk item for each agenda item, for item 1 and for item 2. So, commissioners, if you do need any additional time to review those, please give me a nod when we get to that item. Requested continuances is our next item. We have none, and so I will move on to subcommittee reports. Have there been any subcommittee meetings since our last meeting? None. Okay. This brings us to verbal communications. So this is the portion on tonight's agenda. If anyone wishes to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, this is your chance to do so. I have one card, and that is for Tom Mangiano. And all speakers, if you would, for the record, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address when you get to the microphone, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Tom Mangano, 112 Panorama Way, Los Gatos. I come here tonight, and I probably won't be able to finish this in 3 minutes, so unfortunately you'll see me again. But I come here as a concerned citizen, because I think our planning process is broken. Last week, the city council threw you guys under the bus for the second time on our project. And I walk away with a lot of confusion and disappointment. A couple things can happen, but I think they all favor the developer. And but the topic tonight is, when you had our hearing in June, 3 of the 5 of you all asked our legal people, can you combine A&S and the MAP Act? And all 3 of you got the same answer, yes. So after you denied it, the applicant then turns around and says, you can't do that. So, and then staff doesn't even support that legal position in their staff report. So what confuses me is the planning department doesn't support you guys. They don't support legal. Town council doesn't support you guys. Mr. Brzezinski, at a drop of a hat, will say you guys erred. So why would a developer ever come to an agreement with the neighbors or ever come to an agreement with you guys if the power only sits in the council. And then you add the fact that all your developers are changing their plans between your meeting and their meeting. And we, the proponents, never even get to see those changes. They're not even in the desk items. But the town council allows them to introduce that. It totally changes the dynamic. It totally puts the developer at the advantage. And I think it's admirable that you all are working on a new general plan, but it's not admirable if the city council doesn't support that general plan. Brzezinski and McNutt don't support the general plan. It's a facade, and Rice appears to be joining them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that wished to speak to the commission under verbal communications? Okay, seeing none. I'll move right along to our next agenda item. We were supposed to have a presentation from our economic vitality manager, but unfortunately she's not able to make it, so that item will be continued to the next meeting. Okay. So if you're here for that, sorry, and we'll look for that at our next meeting. We have nothing on our consent calendar, so that brings us to our first public hearing. It's a continued public hearing. It's 15.5 North Santa Cruz Avenue, conditional use permit U-10-011. It's requesting approval to increase the hours of operation, increase the number of seats, and allow live entertainment in a bar and restaurant. And can we have a staff report?
Yes, Ms. Savage will be presenting that report.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. There is a desk item for this project as mentioned earlier, and it is available in the lobby. The project site is located on the west side of North Santa Cruz Avenue, approximately 150 feet north of Main Street. Test. Okay. Commercial uses are located on the north, east, and south. A public parking lot is located to the west. The subject commercial space located on the second floor was more recently occupied by 180 Restaurant and Lounge and Club 180. The applicant, who is a different owner and operator from the former Los Gatos Bar and Grill at this location, wishes to reopen the establishment as a dining and entertainment venue that will also be called Los Gatos Bar and Grill. The applicant operates a number of similar successful businesses in the city of San Jose. The applicant worked extensively with the city, both their police department and the planning department, to improve safety and security for San Jose's downtown restaurants, bars, and their nightlife. The applicant also worked with the City of San Jose staff to draft multiple ordinances. The applicant received high compliments from the City of San Jose. The proposal appears to be in conflict with town policies, and I will discuss the apparent conflicts as follows. In terms of the hours of operation, they are proposed from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m., 7 days a week. The alcoholic beverage policy limits hours of operation to end at 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and at 1 a.m. Friday and Saturday. These are the existing hours of operation beginning at 11 a.m. In addition to the apparent conflict with the alcoholic beverage policy, the police department reviewed the proposal and has concerns with the hours of operation as it relates to the police department staff capacity to deal with security issues. The applicant has worked closely with our police department to create an acceptable security plan. Second, the requirement number 6 in the alcoholic beverage policy directs the deciding body to make specific findings to approve an application to serve alcoholic beverages after 10 p.m. The findings relate to impacts adjacent to residential neighborhoods, the applicant's history of complaints and noncompliance with local ordinances and the policy, and the applicant's benefit to the community. The purpose of the ABP is to provide assurance that the hours of operation will be regulated for a variety of reasons, including the proximity to residential neighborhoods and the concentration of alcoholic beverage serving establishments within one area. More particularly, the alcoholic beverage policy addresses late night service when alcoholic-related incidences are most likely to occur. And in relation to both the requirement number 6 and the purpose, it appears it could be in conflict. Staff has included recommendations, if the deciding body finds merit in the project, to reduce the apparent conflicts. In terms of the patio operation, the applicant is requesting that no separation on the outdoor patio be provided from the adjacent walkway. The walkway is shared by uses, office uses that also occupy the building. Requirement number 8 of the alcoholic beverage policy allows alcoholic beverage service in the outdoor seating area when adequate separation from public spaces is provided. The town does have standards for outdoor restaurant seating, and it requires a physical separation between private and public property. The existing conditional use permit for the subject site does require separation of that outdoor patio space from the shared walkway, and staff recommends that this condition remain if the subject application is approved, so that the restaurant and bar continue to comply with the alcoholic beverage policy that requires separation and the standards for outdoor seating. It should be noted that the applicant has stated that no separation should be required due to the fact that it is not a public property where the walkway is located, but staff does feel that the separation would benefit the outdoor patio from separating and preventing alcoholic beverages from being passed along the walkway. The applicant is requesting to extend the hours of operation in the outdoor patio as well, and those hours go past the hour limitation within the alcoholic beverage policy. Additionally, again, with the purpose of the alcoholic beverage policy about the protection of the residential, nearby residential neighborhoods, the nearest residence is approximately 185 feet from the outdoor patio, and staff does recommend that there is some sort of noise attenuation placed on the patio, and also that the hours are limited to 11 p.m. to address any potential impacts to the residential neighborhood. In regards to the number of seats, the applicant's proposal for the maximum number of seats does appear to be in conflict with the town code as it relates to parking requirements and also as it relates to the traffic impact policy. Staff does recommend that if the deciding body finds merit in the proposal, that the maximum number of seats is limited to a lower level so that it complies with town code, and given that a traffic study hasn't been required, that it also meets the traffic impact policy. In terms of the location of food, beverage, and entertainment, the applicant is requesting the flexibility to serve food, alcoholic beverages, and provide entertainment in all areas of the restaurant, of the establishment. Right now, the establishment is limited to serving alcoholic beverages with meals only in the dining area, and allowing flexibility outside of that and allowing alcoholic beverages to be served without meals in all areas could result in a standalone bar and could also be in conflict with the alcoholic beverage policy. In terms of the alcoholic beverage policy, the policy specifically states that restaurants with separate bars are required to serve meals with alcoholic beverage service in the dining area. This particular project has a dining area, a lower lounge, an upper lounge, and a bar area. And the applicant is proposing that in some manner, a portion of the restaurant is always required to serve meals with alcoholic beverages to comply with the policy. In terms of live entertainment, the applicant is proposing live entertainment where the alcoholic beverage policy says that the town shall discourage entertainment venues serving alcoholic beverages, and also limits entertainment establishments to be established only when there is a set of standards and a policy or a permitting process. Neither standards nor a permit process has been completed at this time. However, it is on staff's work plan to be drafted at the end of this fiscal year. The applicant is amenable to a trial period, which staff recommends if the deciding body finds merit in the project, that they consider doing a trial period for the live entertainment. The applicant is also amenable for that trial period to be reviewed by the community development director and the police chief. And the community development director and the police chief would be the deciding parties if there are no issues with the live entertainment for the live entertainment to continue or to increase. The alcoholic beverage policy notes that the service of alcoholic beverages is a discretionary privilege to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The hearing body should consider whether the proposal will impact residential neighborhoods, result in alcoholic-related incidences, and whether the application will be a positive impact to the commercial area. Due to staff's lack of discretion in regards to the alcoholic beverage policy, staff must recommend denial. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you. I have, okay, Commissioner Talsford, you can go. Yeah, let me go first. Just to be clear, because this has to do with the alcohol policy, we're making a recommendation to Town Council one way or the other. Is that correct? We're not taking
Yes.
final action.
Correct.
And so given the way the policy reads, I read the alcohol policy very closely this time. I mean, we deal with this all the time, but there doesn't seem to be any discretion allowed. I know you commented that staff is bound by the lack of discretion in the policy. Maybe this is a question for council. I mean, how bound are we? There doesn't seem to be any mechanism there to make exceptions to, for example, the hours.
It is council's policy, and so the ultimate decision would be on council on how they interpret the policy. When in reviewing this, you could make recommendations to the council of maybe amending the alcohol policy if you find their request. There's certain aspects of the request that they have has merit. You could request that the council relook at the alcohol policy and make revisions. But it is correct that your discretion is not as broad as the council's in reviewing this application.
Thank you. And one final question for the record, because one of the things we have to do to make findings to serve alcoholic beverages past 10 p.m. That the applicant does not have a history of complaints. So this is a new applicant, but I believe at that property there's been a history of complaints on noise on that patio. I think that was in our staff report. But the policy says the applicant doesn't have a history of complaints. So I'm having trouble teasing out the complaints from that location from a similar use versus complaints from the applicant. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, one, you could use the comments made from the San Jose Police Department, how they have supported this applicant. Also, there's conditions of approval where you could regulate the use for a limited period to review the application to ensure that there are no complaints generated when they commence operation, if approved.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I have a question on the categorical exemption. I went to 15031, which is the cited section, which concludes by saying the key consideration is whether the project involves negligible or no expansion of an existing use. I see no discussion in here, just a flat-out statement that it's categorically exempt, and I would suggest that one of the things we have to find out tonight is whether we could make the finding that the project involves negligible or no expansion of an existing use. And it's fairly obvious that what is asked for is not negligible. So I throw that in case staff thinks there's a misreading of the last sentence of 15031.
Does staff have a response then?
Interpreting CEQA, expansion of use is based on square footage, not the actual use changing, but it's the expansion of square footage.
What do you rely on for that?
I think the
definition of a categorical exemption, as I recall, is it can be clearly seen that it would not have an effect on the environment, and the statutes begin by saying it is not an absolute. So if you were of the opinion that this was negligible, there should at least be a discussion in the staff report. So I'll look forward to hearing from the applicant or my fellow commissioners why the proposal would be a negligible or continued use. It also isn't clear to me why that exemption would apply here, since it is a modification of a use permit. There's nothing in the report telling me that there's an existing use, which I think there is not, and if there's not, how long it's not been used, because at some point it becomes abandoned. I assume it hasn't been long enough to be abandoned, but I don't know that from the record. So could we also find out factually how long it's been since that business has been open? Or maybe it is.
We'll try to check the file and get that information for you.
Thank you. Commissioner Talsfor, you had your hand up next. Sorry.
My question should be somewhat simpler. You said the staff's report stated that this restaurant is 185 feet from the nearest residence. And where is that residence? Is it behind the restaurant, where the patio area is facing?
It is south.
The residence you're thinking?
No, I'm thinking of the one on Main Street that's above commercial offices at 223 and 227.
Right.
Main.
Okay. Well, what about the ones behind the restaurant?
And so those are further away than the residential apartments above the offices at 227.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Machici.
Just more a question for our attorney, if I may. Policy clearly states that the nip permit shall not be allowed after 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, except for holiday and evening, and after 1 a.m.
Phil, can you check your mic?
I talk loud enough anyway.
Not for the people on KCAT, though.
Do I have to say it all over again?
No. Well, not my call.
The policy clearly states that it shall not be allowed after 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, except for holidays, and after 1 a.m. Friday. Now, since that's a pretty definitive statement, I'm not going to make any recommendation against the policy, right? They asked me to review the policy for changes now, but not to exceed limits that have been set here. So what would I be recommending? That their policy is for the birds? Or what do I say to it?
Well, I think this particular use, I think the CUP that runs with the property, if I'm correct, has hours in excess of that because it was grandfathered in when the policy was adopted. Is that correct?
No.
No. I thought they did go to 1 o'clock on some days.
The application, the current use is allowed to go to 1 a.m. on the days that the alcoholic beverage policy allows that, which is Friday and Saturday.
Okay. But, so your question is, why would you ever go against the policy?
Well, yeah, what am I going to recommend? It's it's up to them if they want to expand it, but.
Right, and the policy is, obviously, it's in the nature of a resolution as opposed to an ordinance, but the most you can do in your advisory role to the council is to advise the council whether you think there may be grounds to make exceptions to the policy if the council can find a reason to make exceptions.
Okay, so I didn't read it that way,
But that's and you know, that's also implicit in the fact that the council's final approval authority. So if you as a planning commission focusing on planning and compatibility and those type of things, you know, implementation of the general plan, you think there's some grounds to support the applicant's request, you can advise the council of that.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I had one other question. If I read the staff report correctly, because the applicant is the one who got essentially the good marks from San Jose PD and others, I suppose, I read this to say there'll be some limitation on the CUP running with the land, which CUPs normally do. But when I read the conditions, it says the lessor will review any change in ownership of more than 50%. And I don't know what in the world the lessor is doing if our condition is it's not essentially assignable or it doesn't run with land. So I have a question is, how do we pass that on to the lessor? And secondly, is council comfortable that you can issue a conditional use permit and have it not attached to the land and run with the land?
But I think I'm going back to when I was asked this question by the planning director. The CUP does still run with the land, but the CUP, as it would be approved, if it has tailored conditions for a particular operator, will apply to that CUP. So it is It's in any CUP, the landlord must consent to the CUP.
And if the landlord consents, we have no power there. Is that correct?
No power on, no, you
Well,
have
normally a
power.
condition is something that someone enforces. If the condition is he gets the landlord's approval, and let's assume the landlord approves somebody who has a history in San Jose of complaints, wherein is the condition such that it allows the approving body to do something? It's like saying the condition is that the applicant has to be 52 years old and 6'2", and his name has to be Jones. I don't quite understand that condition.
Okay, let's look at the condition. Go ahead.
And can I just clarify that the condition that's on the recommended conditions regarding the lease agreement is is a carryover condition from the previous conditional use permit. There was an existing use at that location. It was vacated in May of this year, and that is a carryover condition from the previous conditional use permit. In relation to the new applicant, on page 7 of the staff report, staff has included a revision to one of the conditions in Exhibit 3 that states if the applicant no longer owns or operates the establishment, that the use should be subject to the conditions of the previous approval.
Which is the lessor approval condition.
Correct.
So my question would apply to that, too. If that condition was not enforceable originally, then it would not become enforceable now. So I have the same question. Is it enforceable, and if so, by whom?
Which condition are we talking?
So perhaps staff can mull that over and get back to us during commission discussion?
Well,
Is that right?
also,
Commissioner Telesfor?
yep, what number is that condition that you just read?
The carried over condition is now condition number 14 in Exhibit 3. And the condition that would be revised is condition number 3.
Number 3?
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Sayak, did you have a comment as well, or?
My other commissioners had asked those.
Okay. Okay, do we have any other questions of staff, or can we go ahead and get the applicant going? All right. So, the applicant, I have a card, Joe Guerra and David Powell representing the applicant. You'll have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. As you heard, my name is David Powell, and I am one of the owners of Los Gatos Bar and Grill. I'm here with one of my partners, Joe Guerra. I've been a longtime patron of downtown Los Gatos, and I've dreamed of opening my own business in this very space for the past 20 years. It's with great excitement that I'm here in front of you this evening. Our goal with Los Gatos Bar and Grill is to deliver a vibrant dining and entertainment experience to local upscale clientele. We believe with our menu and operating experience, we can take an underutilized space and create a new neighborhood asset for downtown Los Gatos. We're proud to have the support of many of our fellow downtown businesses as well as residents. What we're respectfully asking from you is a little more flexibility in our conditional use permit so we can create the best experience possible for our customers that will allow our business to be successful not only now but in the future. With a strong track record and operating experience, we know that we can work with the town to create a new business that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
I can't read that.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you for your time. I'm going to try to be very brief, given that I've got 3.5 minutes left. And I understand the issue about whether there is discretion or not as it relates to the alcohol beverage policy. In your desk item, there's a matrix that talks about the conditions that staff are recommending if you chose to recommend the council to approve. And so I want to focus on that because there are only a very few areas of disagreement with ourselves and the staff. On the issue of seating, staff is recommending the 166 seats without a traffic study, or up to 192 if we would like to do that. We agree with that recommended condition. That would require a community benefit, and staff referenced our letter, which had some generic language about community activity that we've had at our other venues. Wanted to point out that we have already pledged and signed contracts to support the Los Gatos High School Athletic Association, St. Mary's School County Fair, and the West Valley Pop Warner program locally. On the issue of operating hours, There are comments in there regarding our ongoing conversations with the police department in Los Gatos, as well as our work with the city of San Jose and very extensive security procedures that the police department has indicated they would like to have as conditions of approval. We agree with that condition. On the patio hours, we did ask for midnight. Staff's recommending 11 o'clock. We agree. On the noise attenuation, we are agreeing with that as well. And on the restaurant bar separation, there has been some discussion about the 50-50 rule. I can come back under question and answer to explain more what we mean about that. But we do agree that 50% of the space today is required to be a dining area where there's food in order to get alcohol. We're agreeing with a condition that would continue to require that. We like some flexibility about having it maybe be a different area for lunch as opposed to late night dining in the space. On the physical barrier, I just want to point out that the town's outdoor seating policy, if you read it, talks very clearly about passing to people as if you were on a sidewalk. Our outdoor seating area is on a second floor balcony, and the only public area is a walkway that's a secondary access to some offices that share the second floor with us. We don't think it's appropriate because that walkway actually separates our outdoor seating from our kitchen. So our staff have to be able to walk back and forth. So if there's a barrier, there's some logistical problems. On the issue of the sale of the business, that came up in your conversation earlier. We understand the concern, and we are suggesting that we would agree with that condition, but would suggest that once an entertainment permit process is in place in the town, that condition would go away, because we think that's more appropriately contained in an entertainment permit, which actually relates to the owners operators as opposed to running with the land. Finally, on live entertainment, we want to be very, very clear. The live entertainment we are asking for is a DJ. We are asking for the ability to have a DJ. We believe today, in working with staff, that we can have music. We could have a DJ burn a CD and play it all night, but the DJ can't stand there and change the music. That's what we're asking for. We'd like that to be approved as a condition of the CUP period, and at the trial period apply to live bands, which we've asked for once a month, subject to potentially increasing if the police department and the community development director are in agreement with that increasing in the future. Again, we respectfully request your approval. We're available to answer questions whenever that's appropriate in the hearing this evening, and we thank you for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you for your presentation. If you guys could stay up there, I'm sure there'll be some questions for you right away. Commissioner Donald, do you have a question?
Yes, I have questions on your on what we call the desk item.
Check your microphone, please.
And these are questions I just want to be clear with your position. Under seating, staff had recommended 166 without traffic, but requiring a community benefit, which we'll defer for the moment. But it says up to 192 with traffic study subject to community development director approval. You say you agree with that, is that correct?
Yes, it's 166 without doing a traffic study, and we're accepting that as the limiter at the moment. Staff has recommended that if we chose to do a traffic study, we actually have parking capacity up to the 192, and we'd like to be able to continue to work with staff to determine if we want to try to go up to that limit. But yes, we're agreeing to the 166.
So at the moment, then, we would not know whether we're approving. Well, I assume we therefore should assume that we're approving 192, subject to the approval of the community development director and a traffic study, which we will not see.
That is correct.
And then, under operating hours, you had proposed 2 a.m., and the staff, the comment you got about the staff, is a little confusing to me, because whereas you say 2 a.m., it then says, the staff says to include operating and security measures as required by the chief of police. So you're suggesting then that the staff agrees with you, 2 a.m., so long as the security measures are approved by the chief of police.
I want to make sure I'm not misstating, and I'm not going to try to speak for staff. We understand very clearly that staff cannot recommend approval because of the policy. I'm not suggesting staff's recommending approval with that condition. I'm suggesting, as I read it, and it's my understanding, the staff has suggested for you and the council that if there was a decision to give us that in your discretion, these are the types of conditions that should be included to mitigate any issues. On the issue of the hours, as staff pointed out, there was a concern of the police department about their ability to deal with the extra hours of operation, and subsequent to their meeting with us, a couple of meetings with us, they're discussing with San Jose Police Department, and their review of our security and operations plan that if you were going to approve 2 a.m., that those should be conditions that would help mitigate that.
So
we're agreeing for those to be part of our CUP.
So when it says agree with staff, you mean if we were to accept what you said, then the staff would say, well, then condition it?
That is correct.
Okay, and then I have, I think, 2 more questions. The next one is in number 6, restaurant and bar separation. I think, misunderstood your proposal. What you're saying is you'd like the liquor service possibly to be in one area for lunch and then for dinner in a possibly in a different area? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, if I can just put an exhibit up here to somewhat explain that at the moment. I don't know if that's going to come out real well. The current conditional use permit defines very clearly physically where the dining area is. The red box, the red rectangle you see there is what the current conditional use permit says, where you cannot get alcohol unless you have food. Okay, so if it stays that way, that would be the area where we would have to have food service all the time. That makes sense for us operationally for lunch and dinner operation. It doesn't necessarily make sense to us operationally for our late night operations, for late night food. So what we've suggested to staff is there are a couple different ways to lay out how do you have 83 seats, half of our occupancy, require food. So there might be a different configuration at lunch than there would be, say, at midnight when we're open serving food as well. We'd like to continue to work with staff to have, what would basically be different floor plans that would show, in these hours, here's when you do it, and here's another configuration where you flip it to the other side, late night, that's where the food is. Same number of seats, same requirement, but it's physically different in the space. And that was what my colleague mentioned earlier about the flexibility to try to have the operation. So that's the suggestion on the 50-50 issue.
Okay, so we won't know what that is. So when you say agree with staff condition, that's a condition that has not yet been arrived at because you haven't sat down with them.
Well, no, the condition we're suggesting for purpose of the Planning Commission is that there would be a requirement that 50% of the area would be required to have food.
We just don't know where the 50% is at any given time.
That is correct. At the moment, yes.
Okay, and the last question I have is sale of business causes reversion to the old conditional use permit. You say recommend that this condition expire after creation of entertainment permit process or 2 years, whichever comes first. And I've just been told, and I believe it says here, that the use permit under which this business operated as until May had a lease provision in it, which allowed the lessor to approve an assignment of 50% or more. I don't know anything about your lease, but is that condition going to stay?
But I can tell you that exact language is in our lease. We're happy to share the lease with the town if they'd like to see it. It is my belief, and I'm not town council, that if you have a more restrictive regulation, that would still hold from a regulatory perspective. All that we're suggesting is, and this gets, frankly, to your point about running with the land versus the operator, in our other operations in San Jose has conditional use permit and entertainment permits. One of the issues with our application is the town hasn't yet developed the entertainment permit process, and staff had commented about doing that this year. The entertainment permit is with the operator. There are the specific individuals that get that permit. We understand the recommendation of the permit, the value of having these conditions is tied to us as operators. We're just suggesting that may more appropriately reside in the entertainment permit than the conditional use permit, hence why we're suggesting we agree with the condition. We think it should expire when it moves over to the entertainment permit.
And you're not seeking an entertainment permit because we don't have entertainment permit?
That is correct. You have not developed one yet.
But the permit that we can't grant you should expire in 2 years?
No. The conditional use permit condition that says if we sell, it reverts to the old conditional use permit, we're suggesting that expire in 2 years because that's twice as long as has been suggested it will take to develop the entertainment permit.
Commissioner Sayak.
If we could go back to the 50% with the layout. I understand you want the flexibility of the 50%. Does the 50% include the outdoor patio areas? Will you be serving food out there?
The 50% does not include the outdoor patio areas. The current CUP does not have that restriction on the outdoor patio area.
So so it'd be 50% of what's indoors?
That is correct.
And at any time, it's difficult for me to envision how this will work, because in our traditional CUPs, it's clearly laid out where's dining, where's not. If I'm a patron entering your facility, is there any portion of your restaurant where I will not be able to order food?
No.
Or do I simply have to be in the right place at the right time?
No, there will be food available 100% of our space.
Okay.
You could sit at the bar with a bartender and still be served food. So food's available in 100% of the space. The current conditional use permit restricts 50% of the space, so you cannot have alcohol unless you also get food.
Okay.
So 100% of space, food if you want, 50% food must.
Okay. And if you can clarify then what is currently existing with the outdoor portion and what you are asking for. Are you asking for both food and alcohol?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly your question.
On the patio, what are you looking for with this CUP? Food service as well as alcohol service? Both, either?
Food available as
Food
opposed to food mandated.
Okay. And
which we believe is what the current CUP allows.
And will food be available up to 2 o'clock as what your CUP is asking for?
That is correct. We are proposing a 1:30 end of alcohol service, 2 a.m. end of food service.
Okay. And then one more question with regards to the outdoor area. Your live entertainment, will any of that music, whether it's a DJ or a band, will that be released through speaker systems outside in the patio area? Or is it simply for the indoor area?
We are proposing the live music to be exclusively indoors.
Exclusively indoors, okay. That's it for now.
Okay. Commissioner Machichi.
Part of the reason we're moving the 50% area is that in our experience with our other venues, the type of dining that goes on, let's say after 10 o'clock, is different than if you come down at 6 o'clock with your family to have dinner. So that, coupled with the DJ and live entertainment aspect of our operation, physically it makes more sense to have the DJ operation down in the lower lounge, which is in the area that you see boxed here. That also makes more sense for the lunch and dinner service. So we would, in the lunch and dinner time, have that lower lounge, fully tabled chairs. Some of those tables and chairs are going to go away at late night because it's where the DJ would be. And then the upper lounge would be where the food would be required.
Commissioner Talsfor.
Let's continue along that line. So if I wanted to come in at 10 and have a dinner with 4 friends, I could not eat, just to review this, in this 50% where it was, could I see the other paper? Thanks. There, where you have, right? I could still eat there even though the DJ is there?
Again, you can eat anywhere in the establishment
Okay.
100% of the time.
Right. So when you have a DJ, I would assume that there would be dancing?
That is correct.
And where will that occur?
That's in that same area.
So how many of those tables will go away?
What we're suggesting is that we would always be required to have half of the table seating area have the food requirement. In this configuration, Dave, maybe you can sort of point to, the upper area would be seating. The lower area, the center tables that are being pointed to right now, would go away, and that would become the dance floor area. Whereas today, again, in the existing conditional use permit, the upper lounge is allowed to have pool tables and again, not have dining necessarily in the upper lounge area.
You know, this is a question. Can I have a follow-up on this? This is a question about sound and your DJ and the windows in that building. I don't know. I don't remember, but are they operable at all? Are they triple
windows that
pane
face
so
Santa
that the
Cruz-
sound won't carry onto the street?
No, they're not operable.
Okay. And then getting back to the patio area, what kind of seating would you have out there? It's not indicated here. Are they tables, chairs only, high boy, high
They're
tops?
tables and chairs.
Is that high tops?
It's actually both. There's a section of the patio that is high top tables and chairs, and there's a section of the patio that is lower lounge seating with coffee table dining as well. So it's 50-50. So as you would be on maybe a hotel patio to have a drink and eat a meal, there's that, or there's high top service as well if you want to sit down at a high top and have dinner at that. We're trying to make it as versatile as possible for our customers.
So your physical separation, the attenuation, sound attenuation, I think is what the staff is referring to out on that patio. What would that be?
What staff has suggested is that there be there is sound attenuation on the stairway leading up in the backside towards the joint lobby area with Mountain Charlie's in our establishment. It's basically plexiglass up along the railing. We have a couple of establishments where we have very thick plexiglass framed out areas that will go up to a certain height so you can still see through. So if you're sitting on the patio, you can still see the sunset over the mountain or the trees in the parking lot, but it would be a noise attenuating device in that manner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sack.
I just thought of two more questions. The first is you did significant outreach to your neighboring businesses, and I commend you for that. One of the concerns, though, with the alcohol beverage policy is to protect the residential areas. And so I wanted to know if you have had any conversations with any of the residents. I guess the staff has identified where is your closest residential neighbors, and if you could talk to us about if you haven't had any conversations with them. And then if you could talk a little bit about your, I guess there's a lot of discussion about the operations manual that you have in your existing facilities in San Jose. And if you could just talk a little bit about how you plan to implement those, specifically with, age check and at 2 o'clock, how your staff knows who's inebriated, who can drive, who can walk down those treacherous stairs.
Sure. I'll do the first and let Dave do the second. On the outreach, first of all, there was 500-foot noticing to everyone, so the 185-foot away apartments would have gotten notice, as well as if there were any. I don't know exactly where the houses were you were talking about behind the parking lot. I don't know if that's more than 500 feet or not. But so first of all, the 500-foot noticing did happen. We did not go knock on doors at the apartments across Main Street. We did meet with the school next door to the parking lot, as well as all the adjacent businesses, but we did not go across Main to talk to the residents.
Actually, if I could, how did the meeting with the school go?
I would willing to suggest you feel free to call Sister Nikki, but I'm pretty confident that they're very comfortable with our operations.
Okay, thanks.
As far as the policy and procedures manual, it's been something that we've honed over the past 15 years. We have quite a bit of experience with it, really to the point where our policy and procedures manual has become kind of the benchmark now for businesses in San Jose. It used to be a requirement of an operational cliff notes, if you will. Ours is more like 40 pages long. It's a full training seminar that we do with all of our employees. We have ongoing employee meetings every month to go over new policies and procedure. It's something that they sign. It goes in their employee folder. We will be working closely with the Los Gatos Police Department. We have talked to the chief about our policy and procedures manual. It's my understanding that he's comfortable with it, to the point where the manual that we operate with now, as I said, has become that benchmark. We work closely with the police department now downtown, actually helping them train other venues on how to operate, how to be, effective, and addressing the concerns you have. As far as age check, there is a program, or actually a device, if you will, called ID Scan that we have been trying to implement downtown for, 5 years now. We're pretty close to implementing it. It's something that we would want to bring here. It's basically a computerized system where it's very easy to do a kind of a universal trespass system, or make sure people, that underage people aren't getting in, that people who, potentially could cause problems, which we don't see that happening much here, that they wouldn't be allowed back in, things like that. But these are all things that we go over every month. It's not a policy we draft and then throw in the corner. It's something we go over every month with our employees. Our new employees are tested on our policy and procedures manual before they can start.
It's very thorough.
Okay.
Two other points to that. The first is Dave and John Conway, who's one of our other partners, who's one of the owners of Britannia Arms and the Brit at the airport, are actually who the police department bring in to train police officers on who will be working in the downtown. And secondly, as it relates to fake ID, underage ID, we actually have been participating with the San Jose Police Department for 3 to 6 months now on actually an undercover program where we're working with the Vice Squad to help identify underage drinkers that are coming in with fake IDs to our establishments.
Thank you. Commissioner Telesfor.
Follow up with that. When you, when the neighbors were noticed, did they realize that there'd be a change of conditions and operating times, rather, with your establishment? Do you know if that went out?
You know, I'm not positive as to what exactly was in the notice.
Probably not. Okay. And there was another. Oh, I know. My other question was, could we talk a little bit about entering and exiting your restaurant in this establishment?
Well, our establishment actually has the benefit of having 3 different ingress and egress, 2 different ingress, 3 different egress stairs from the second floor, 2 of which we share with Mountain Charlie's, 1 that we do not share with them. And part of what we've been working with the police department and county fire and the fire marshal are some operation plans on, for example, not having the queuing in the stairway on the North Santa Cruz Avenue side of the establishment, which is something they're working with Mountain Charlie's right now, so that you don't clog up exit ways with people queuing to come into the establishment. But we would have the front stairway on North Santa Cruz. There's a back stairway into the main entrance, and then there's, which are both ingress and egress, and there's a third that we have exclusive right to, a egress stairway that comes out in the back parking lot up towards Main Street.
So how are you going to prevent people, so you do have to have someone stationed, though, at the bottom of the staircase?
Yes.
On Santa Cruz Avenue?
Yes.
To tell people to what? I mean, are you letting them up the stairs? I missed that?
As far as, well, obviously at during lunch hours, absolutely, we want people to come into the establishment from anywhere. If they're on Santa Cruz Avenue, come up the front stairs, come have a meal. If you're going to park in the back, come up the back stairwell. I've spent time when I was back in college many years ago on that front stairwell late at night. I agree. It at times can't be safe. It's packed with people. We are going to actually attempt to, and what we've talked to the police department about is actually utilizing, not allowing people to enter our establishment from that front stairwell. If we did happen to queue a line, it would be down on the sidewalk, but we'd like to attempt to move our clientele away from the existing business that is already there, so that we can bring people up the back stairwell and queue our lines there, so it's safer and it's away.
And how will you do that?
How will I do that?
Yeah, tell me how you will do that.
It's pretty simple. I station a door host downstairs. He can be there with a sign that says Los Gatos Bar and Grill, entrance with an arrow, points him around back. Eventually, customers just figure that out by themselves, Commissioner. If they want to come somewhere.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, they eventually figure it out. But we will put somebody there to make sure they know. It'll be very clear.
What time would that be starting?
It'll be very clearly marked. I'm sorry?
What time would you be posting someone at the bottom of the stairs?
Usually around 10 p.m. or whenever entertainment would start.
By the way, that's another question I had and I forgot to ask. When does entertainment start?
There are no current conditions on sort of when you can play music in the establishment from an operational.
But what are you proposing?
We're not proposing any conditions on when we
No,
can have.
I mean, what time would?
Operationally, it's usually like 9, 10 o'clock at night that you would start your actual DJ entertainment.
And Commissioner O'Donnell.
First, I want to say you obviously know your business, and I want to compliment you on that. I'm trying to figure out, I don't think I saw it, where your operation is downtown. Is it near the old Fox Theater, the Symphony?
No. We actually have 3 establishments on 2nd Street, 1 on the corner of 2nd and Santa Clara, 2 directly across from the Improv Theater, and then our other partner, John Conway, has the Britannia Arms that is up on Santa Clara and then also in the airport.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is when I go to if I go downtown to the Symphony of the Opera or whatever is playing in that lovely building they've restored, there's a lot of activity on a Friday and Saturday night. But as near as I can tell, it's sort of limited to the area, that immediate area. Does that include, are you included in that area? Because there's a lot of activity.
You're talking about by the California Theater?
Yes.
Yeah. No, there's three distinct entertainment areas, I guess, in the entertainment zone downtown. The area you're talking about by the California Theater is the SoFa district. No, none of our establishments are in that district. There's also the San Pedro Square district, where the Britannia Arms is located, and our three venues are in the historical district, which is on 2nd Street, as I said, right across from the Improv Theater. We are right around the corner from Gordon Biersch.
Okay, I know the location. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, most of my questions have been asked already, but I do have one. Do you have, you had a graphic up earlier, but it didn't quite show the whole patio. Do you have this graphic you could put up?
Yes.
So my question is, you made a comment in your presentation about the separation between the patio where you can have alcohol and the public, and putting up a barrier would interfere with access to the kitchen. And I was I was looking at the map trying to figure out how that would interfere, and I couldn't quite figure that out.
Sure. Dave, can you point to where the doorway is? So
this doorway here is.
If the person at the microphone could speak, or you can pull the microphone. You can pull the microphone out.
So there's a doorway where he's pointing that comes out of the interior of our space, which is kitchen, dining area, upper lounge, lower lounge. That doorway goes onto the patio. The seating, as you can see, is at the edge of the patio because it makes sense to have it along the railing facing the trees and the mountains. The space between the seating that you see and the wall is where the walkway is. So as our wait staff or as our patrons come out that doorway to be seated or to be served, the barrier that's being discussed would prohibit you from walking from point A, which if you can point again to where the doorway is, from where the doorway is to where the seating is, which is why logistically if you put a barrier all the way along there as if it was the edge of a sidewalk, which makes sense because in a sidewalk cafe, your cafe is next to your restaurant. It's not separated by the sidewalk. So that's the logistical issue.
I see, because there's the access hallway in the interior to those businesses that the quote-unquote public would be coming through.
Yeah, all the businesses, there are a number of offices that share the second floor with us. They have an entrance on North Santa Cruz that's separate from our entrance on North Santa Cruz. So up towards Main, Avery and Associates and the other businesses that are up on the second floor, their addresses are all North Santa Cruz, their stairs are North Santa Cruz, and if you were in the space, you would understand very clearly that is their main ingress, egress. Their secondary, because you have to have a second way out, is through the back and through that patio area. So that is the public walkway that staff is suggesting to separate the public walkway from our diners. You would put up that physical barrier.
Thank you. Let me follow up with staff a question. So is the concern separating from the people that are accessing their businesses, or is the concern people taking alcohol down the stairs and out into the parking lot? To me, that it would be more the intent of why we're trying to put some separation between a public space and a space where people are being served alcohol. So I'm just unclear. I guess where I'm going with this is, could we put something at the top of the stairs, like at Andale, where you just have kind of that swinging barrier at the back of Andale that divides the patio from the parking lot, and it wouldn't interfere with their service? Does that meet the intent of?
It could. You could determine that it meets that intent. There's still that concern that when someone's out on the patio dining, that if there is any patron that's coming up the stairs, although the offices are typically closed during those later dining hours, if someone is walking to the office, there's still that potential that someone walking to the office could easily sit down and have a meal or pass food outside of that area, and with that, beverages may also be passed. And so there is still that concern with sharing the public space and the dining area outside.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so that answered my question. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Sayoc.
So a follow-up to that, during your late night hours specifically, it sounds like you plan to have someone stationed on North Santa Cruz Avenue, as well as the entrance area off of the parking lot. Is the purpose of that person more to monitor people coming in, or do you also use that person to basically prevent alcohol from going in and out? How do you make sure that the scenario we just discussed, where someone comes in underage and someone hands them a beer, if they happen to be in that deck area?
So on the deck area, by the ABC license, alcohol is allowed anywhere on that back patio. It was allowed in the previous ABC license, the previous CUP, and apparently now. So I guess the question is, are you referring to maybe like a lunch hour, or are you referring to late night? Because a lunch hour, our servers are trained to recognize when customers come in. If you're going to get seated, you normally get seated by a host. If somebody sits down, their IDs will automatically get checked by a server to make sure they're of age. If they're not, we know they can't drink. That happens in any restaurant you go to. So that would happen during the day. Our servers take the ABC lead training, which trains them on how to check IDs, how to recognize underage people, and basically how to, and train them on all alcohol policy. It's in our operations manual. It's a requirement of us. Late night, yes, that person's job on the patio, downstairs, at the stairs, would be, yes, to make sure that the people entering the business only come through our main entrance line at that time, which they get their ID swiped, checked by a trained security, person. So, the way that it is set up, it would, with a person standing, it would be virtually impossible for that person to then sneak in, I guess, in that patio. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
And Commissioner Telesfor.
Could we continue along that line? So I see I want to make sure I understand this. I see two staircases. Exit stairs down, you would be using that for people to leave?
Yes, it's the exit stair down, the one that's near Main Street.
Right,
That's the way
is
we're
for
referring
people to leave.
Yes, you can't come up that staircase. There's a
Because what?
push bar. Well, it's a fire push bar exit. So it's locked.
I was out there today, but I guess I didn't see that. Okay, so, but people can leave. And is someone standing there when they leave?
Yes.
You would have a security
Well, there'd be
person
someone.
There would be someone on the patio. There wouldn't be someone standing here, per se, because nobody can come up.
there? Right, but they could, if they wanted to, they could just take whatever they're drinking.
There would be someone between the
Downstairs.
seating and the door.
Yes.
They're not going to be at the door. They're going to be at the edge of the seating area.
Okay, positioned there.
Yes.
And then, so in the parking lot where you have the entrance stair, you plan on doing ID identification, et cetera, at the bottom of the stairs? Or where will that occur?
At the top of the stairs. The stairwell is roughly 7 feet wide. It's a very large stairwell. It's
Yes.
much bigger and not steep at all as opposed as the one in the front is. So we would queue our line, and then there is a door again, as you saw right here. That outside in that area, the line would be queued. It would be away from everybody, against the wall, and then that's where the ID checks would be.
And so are you planning on queuing the line, where in the parking lot would you be queuing that line?
So the line would be queued down the hallway where he's pointing right there, outside that door, and then down the stairs.
Right, so what about overflow?
As far as
Of people who might be jamming to get in. I
So
don't know.
what we do is, in part of our policy and procedures manual, we have hosts that are required to monitor the line while we're operational, to keep the line queued, to make sure people aren't drinking, to watch a line for people that look underage, to basically look for those people before they can get to the door.
Well,
and
there is a
potentially cause
parking lot
problem.
there, which is a concern.
I'm sorry?
There is a parking lot there,
Yes.
which is a concern of putting a line in a parking lot.
We've already discussed that with the police department. There is currently a security guard that is stationed there, and they were originally talking about adding another security guard. What we've asked is that we be required to monitor the parking lot. It's something that we would rather do because it's our business. We feel we will do a better job at it. And in our conversations with the police department, they are happy with our operation plan on how to monitor that parking lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Machici, and then Commissioner Sayoc.
It seems to me that the existing CUP that exists that had these issues there, and were there any issues that came out of that some of the concerns being raised there? I mean, is there any record of issues like that?
The police department does have records of issues of the venue itself. There's none that's specifically to queuing in
The
the
only thing that's
parking lot.
happening here with this one is it's more intense, and they're looking for more hours. But the conditions that we're concerned about existed with the existing CUP. Is that correct?
Not exactly correct. This project has additional security conditions that the previous use did not have.
So it's even tighter than the existing one.
Correct.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
And just to, again, back to the issue of managing the queuing, our two venues on Second Street actually have to manage queuing with a light rail track and a sidewalk and Second Street. So we understand the point you're making about making sure that people don't have lines out into the middle of the parking lot where there's traffic, but with adequate security staffing, which is why we're proposing our security proposal actually be a condition that it can be managed.
Thank you, Commissioner Sayoc and Commissioner O'Donnell.
And for your entertainment, if you could just clarify, are you looking for DJ every day or weekends only?
We're requesting to have the ability to go 7 days a week.
7 days a week? Okay, thanks.
And Commissioner O'Donnell.
Question for staff, but the reason I'm asking it now is in case something comes up, I'd like you to be able to respond to it. We're talking about an existing CUP, even though there's no business there, so I'll refer to it as existing CUP. Did that use have entertainment?
No.
So one significant difference here then is the entertainment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I didn't know factually. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to. Oh.
Can I just clarify that the previous use may have had entertainment in conflict with what was actually allowed. So the CUP did not allow it, but they may have actually had a DJ.
And you say they may. Is that a possibility, or you have some knowledge of that? There's nobody back there.
One moment.
We'll say on the record they did. That's.
I'm just curious to what extent staff has knowledge of this, or is it a rumor? What are you telling me?
So staff is aware that they did have a DJ. I apologize.
Okay, so they did not have permission to have the DJ, but we're going to rely on our enforcement of this, even though we didn't enforce the last one. So that's comforting. Anyway, thank you.
We actually did enforce the fact that they weren't allowed to do that. It became a code enforcement issue. So when the town was made aware of them operating with a DJ, we proceeded to resolve that issue.
How did you resolve it?
Through our code enforcement department. So we worked.
Stopped?
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Telesfor?
To follow up on that, how does code enforcement, do you depend on someone to call in and report this, or do you do monthly checks, or how does that happen? I don't know.
I think code enforcement enactment is many different ways. It can be based upon a complaint. It could be based upon observation. It could be based upon the police department being out there and noticing that entertainment was occurring. I'm not sure exactly how this was brought to light, but staff was involved, and we were actually working with the property owner as well as the last tenant, to basically to close down the use because they were operating outside the parameters of their use permit. And so that's in essence why it ended up terminating around, I think it was around the beginning of May, was because of the pressure from the police department, from zoning enforcement, and possibly from the landowner too, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Let me just follow up on that. If I recall correctly from the staff report, there were something like 14 complaints that the police department responded to, and that was one of the problems the police department had. Here we don't know how, but somehow it came to our attention that the use permit was being violated by entertainment. We then used code enforcement. Ultimately, the business went out of business. Do we know whether the late night DJ or whatever it was bothered anybody? I'm just curious because you do worry about noise. Do we have any reason at all to believe that the code enforcement was called in because of noise?
We actually have Captain Dave Gravel from the police department. I think he probably can respond to that best. Do you want to take a stab at that? Do you want to come here or go over there? Let me see here.
The police department, I believe, we were having problems.
Could you get this microphone? Thanks.
Sorry. We were having problems in that area with both adjoining businesses, Mountain Charlie's and the restaurant Club 180. And because of late night issues dealing with intoxication, fights, unruly patrons, we were paying a lot of attention to what was going on in the businesses. And through our daily watch reports and interaction at department staff meetings with the code enforcement department, we were telling them what our observations were. The officers, absent this issue being risen to the top, the officers working patrol aren't necessarily familiar with the conditions of a use permit per se, but once it became clear to them after they were dealing with these problems there constantly, that there was an issue with that was conveyed on a regular basis to our code enforcement department, who worked to violate their use permit.
Yeah, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I want to follow up on that. Did your officers were having trouble, from what I understand? Was that trouble at all contributed to by the unpermitted music?
I would have a hard time answering that. Intoxication, unruly people, fights, whether the type of music or whether the music itself contributed to people getting in trouble, I really don't know factually.
But the complaints and infractions had to do with intoxication and not noise complaints from neighbors, from residential neighbors?
I am not, off the top of my head, familiar with noise complaints from the music itself inside the business, no.
Okay. Sorry, Ms.
The other
Rooney.
issues that were that we discovered were they were not serving food necessarily while they were open all the time, and the entertainment was one, not serving food. And I'm not sure if there's, I think that they may have been in violation of the hours too.
Commissioner Sack.
One more question. In your opinion, is it better to concentrate these establishments that have entertainment and late night alcohol dining in one area, or is it better to spread it out throughout the town? I'm just looking at the cumulative effect because they are right next to Mountain Charlie's and number 1 Broadway. Is that something that should be a consideration as a planner?
I believe so. We've had issues there before just because of the size of the crowds, and the problems will end up in the back parking lot or out on the street. If they end up on the street, then we're also dealing with Carey Nations, which is just across the crosswalk from the Mountain Charlie's venue. So the more people intoxicated in the small area, the bigger the chances are for there to be major problems. And frequently our officers end up doing a lot more babysitting than they do actual enforcement, and it drains our staffing. That said, we've talked with the applicants and the City of San Jose, and we're currently working with them to see about possibility of management strategies and things such as staggered closing times to get the crowds out, not concentrate them in the same hallway. The applicant is proposing to have separate entrances and exits so that the crowds aren't as commingled as one effort. So that is a way to look at it.
And so just to clarify, the mitigation measures that are under the conditions of approval that have been discussed with the police department, those are the measures that you were just mentioning that would help alleviate this overconcentration.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think I am going to ask you to have a seat at this point. We
Thank
do
you for all
have
your time.
Thank you.
we do have one speaker card from the public. If any member of the public wishes to speak on this item, please fill out a card and get it to me. I have a card for an Era Bedjan, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Where do you press the, is it on? Oh, okay. Good evening, council members. My name is Ara Bezjan. I am a resident of Los Gatos at 200 Winchester Circle. I have been a resident in Los Gatos for approximately 15 years, and I am here on behalf of the proponents of the Los Gatos Bar and Grill in regards to, I believe it would be a positive benefit to the community in the sense that a lot of the entertainment or the late night entertainment has been affected to a detrimental degree by Santana Row and some of the other businesses that have arisen outside of the area. And I know that going into Sky or 180, which was the former business, there were issues as it pertained to how late they could be open and what the venue would offer as far as a DJ or music. With them doing the DJ and the live music, I feel that it would be a positive benefit, and I am a proponent of their business opening in the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for your input. I have 2 more speaker cards that came up. Angelo Haropoulos.
Good evening, Council. My name is Angelo Haropoulos, and I currently am a business owner here in downtown Los Gatos. I own a restaurant here called Opa, Authentic Greek Cuisine. We opened about a year ago, and I'd like to address the Council this evening on 2 issues. The first is on the applicant, Mr. Powell. I've known Mr. Powell for 15 years. And I've also known him on both a personal level and also on a business level. As an entrepreneur and as a business owner, I've had the opportunity to observe him in his business practices throughout the years, and I must say that I highly recommend him to this town. He has all the qualities and attributes that a successful business owner should have. I think he understands 2 really key elements. The first is proper management, and I think that that's something that the council should really, really take into consideration when they look at a new business coming into the town. As most of you know, times are tough right now. They're very tough for small business. And to see somebody like Mr. Powell come in here, number one, with the guts to do something in a pretty challenging time, but number 2, with a solid plan, is commendable. The other thing is, in order to have success, you have to have a solid communication and relationship with the town. And I think that Mr. Powell brings that to the table. One of the things that you brought up, Commissioner, early on was distinguishing whether or not the venue was different than the owner. And there's a big, big difference. Management is everything. And I think that he has what it takes to manage a successful business. I think he knows the challenges. He's got it through years of experience, and he's got a solid head on his shoulders. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about was business. And again, like I said, we all know it's a very challenging time for a lot of small business owners. But there is some light out there. For the people that want to make the moves and take the chances, there's some opportunity. The key is to get the support from the community, to get the support from the city and their town or what have you. I currently own 5 restaurants in neighborhood communities. One of them is Willow Glen. We're opening one in Walnut Creek, Summerlin, Las Vegas, and they're all very close-knit, tight communities, and we get a lot of community support. I think that it's very important now with venues like Santana Row, like Mr. Bezjan brought up, or other areas like downtown Campbell or some of these other spots that have kind of taken the crowd away from this downtown community, to kind of help the business owners here stir up the pot a little bit and generate some of the business that we really need. So with that being said, again, I highly recommend them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Sack has a question for you.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Can you remind me the hours of your restaurant? What time do they close?
We're open from 11 to 11.
11 to 11. And in your opinion, do you feel that the patrons of your restaurant would, if they're there 10, 11, would they, is it the same type of restaurant where you can see some of your patrons walking over and utilizing the new restaurant in question?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's no, just to make it very clear, my philosophy is that the stronger the business in the area, the more people that you're going to attract. And I do believe that our pool will kind of spill over into that pool and vice versa. I think it'll be a positive thing for me, as well as having my business be a positive thing for the Los Gatos Bar and Grill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the last card I have is Jason Farwell.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jason Farwell. I am here on behalf of La Cañada Investments, LLC, who is the owner of the building at North Santa Cruz Avenue. You have our letter of support that I believe is in your packet. I won't waste your time by repeating the information that's contained therein, but I would echo what Angelo just said. I couldn't agree with him more. These guys are a class act, and we've dealt with a number of tenants over there, myself included as a tenant many years ago. It's a very, very difficult location, and we had a lot of interest in that location, and these guys were the best of the best. And we had some very qualified candidates, but these guys clearly have their act together, and I feel very confident, along with the other owners, that these guys will put their best foot forward and bring something very, very positive to this town and to this location. And I would definitely urge you to support their application. Along those lines, there is this issue regarding downtown and the revitalization of our downtown. Not that our downtown is dead, but by all means, I really believe that this particular business will be a catalyst to spark new interest, new people coming to our town and enjoying the town. Granted, with any new business, there may be some side effects to that, but these guys know how to handle that, and they are a very professional group. Finally, there was some talk regarding the apartments across the way. I think they're 185 feet away. That is another building that I'm involved with. Those tenants are very, very familiar with the uses that are in their neighborhood. They've decided to live in a commercial district, as have a lot of the homeowners in that area, the Almond Grove district. They all realize moving in there that this is a commercial district. They're living next to a commercial district. And I'm not trying to minimize that and say that you shouldn't pay any attention to it. I'm just saying that these guys will act responsibly. They will address the residential concerns if there are any. And again, I will end my comments there and say thank you for your time and your attention, and I hope you support their application. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Farwell. Do we have any questions for the speaker? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll call the applicant back up, and you will have 3 minutes to, I don't think you have anything to rebut, but if you want to make any closing comments, please do so.
Thank you again for your time. A couple of points in closing. First of all, I want to go back to the issue of security and parking lot management, and just want to point out that the security measures and the security staffing levels that we're proposing be conditions of our permit are dramatically higher than any existing establishments in downtown Los Gatos. So from our perspective, it's important to point out sort of the staffing levels that we're talking about that would be a condition for us. Secondly, on the issue of sort of DJs 7 days a week and things, and we wanted to point out that one of the things that we plan on doing is having a Sunday brunch. And we want to do, House of Blues does a Sunday blues brunch, for example. We want to try to replicate some activities like that. So part of the reason that we're asking for things that you might say, why do they want to have that in that configuration? Also want to point out that upon opening, we will plan on having well over 100 jobs that we'd be adding to downtown Los Gatos, as well as increased sales tax revenue to the town from what has been historically an underutilized space. We'd like to respectfully request that you recommend to the council that you believe our proposal has merits and should be considered with the conditions that staff have recommended. We understand very clearly the conflict with the alcoholic beverage policy, the conflict with the lack of the entertainment permit being in place. We're simply suggesting that we would like you this evening in your deliberation to recommend to the council that they consider our request with those conditions. I want to thank you again for all your time and your incredible diligence with your questions that you've had for us this evening.
Thank you. Please, oh, sorry. No, you still have time if you wanted to make some comments as well. Okay. So please stay at the mic. Yeah, please stay at the microphone because we're still have the public hearing open and we'll probably have some questions for you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
We've heard a lot of good things about you, and I've heard you say things that I think are intelligent and sound well thought out. And the staff in the report, I don't say constantly, but repeats how they have a high regard for you too. So I guess the question I have is, when we normally, let's say, recommend approval of a CUP, it runs with the land, and the greatest people in the world are there, and then next year they're not. And now we have the worst people in the world, maybe. I don't know. Do you have any suggestions how, if we were to say, wow, these people are so good, we're not going to worry about the kinds of things we would normally worry about. But if I understand what you've said so far, you don't want limitations on your ability, for example, to nobody wants to have to be stuck with something forever. Do you have any suggestions on how we can say, well, these people are really great, we don't know about the future, and therefore there's some limitation we can put in?
We do have a suggestion. We agree with the staff recommendation that you put that provision in the conditional use permit, that it would revert to the old conditions if we were to sell. So staff has suggested that it would revert to the previous conditional use permit. We've suggested a layer on top of that, and that is the issue of the entertainment permit. And again, using the San Jose example, your entertainment permit, which is what allows you to have the DJ and the dancing and everything late night that's sort of been a focus a little bit tonight, is the permit that allows you to do those things. The town of Los Gatos hasn't developed theirs yet. We'll be happy to assist in that. That permit, eventually, when you have it in place, if you're in San Jose and if Dave was to sell San Jose Bar and Grill tomorrow, there's a conditional use permit that allows it to do a whole bunch of things. The new operator would have to go get a new entertainment permit because the entertainment permit is not with the land, it's with the operator. In order to operate, the conditional use permit says you must have an entertainment permit to operate from the police department. That then gives you that double layer of the conditional use permit that runs with the land that requires the entertainment permit for the operator.
My problem is, maybe you can clarify this for me, we don't have entertainment permits. So what we do is we make the entertainment a portion of the conditional use permit, which you and I now recognize what the problem is. And you tell us, were we in San Jose, we'd have an easy solution, and fortunately we're not. And someday we may have entertainment permits where we could do that. But do you have any suggestion what we can do in Little Los Gatos where we don't have an entertainment permit?
Then I would suggest to you, I would suggest doing what your staff is recommending, which is putting a condition in the conditional use permit that says, if we sell, the conditional use permit provisions of this use permit revert to the previous use permit, which is close at 1, no DJ, etc.
Thank you.
The town attorney have a comment on that?
Yes, I think Commissioner O'Donnell had two questions, and the one segues nicely into the last back and forth. Actually, CUP process is better than the entertainment permit. We don't want an entertainment permit. That's an old form of licensing. When the world was young, before they invented land use planning, gave out dance permits, entertainment permits, and you gave them out to the police department. And they didn't care about planning, they didn't care about neighborhoods. It was more about management and crime. So having it in the CUP is fine. I can tell you that there are some challenges with it, and I have actually litigated this in federal court won the case on other grounds against a 9,000 square foot nightclub, and the argument was that we personalized the CUP too much to the operator. And they didn't win on that ground. They lost the case. I can't say they lost on that ground because we won it on other grounds. But it can be done, and the best way to do it is do it with empirical criteria. In other words, here is the conditions under which this is approved for this type of operation. If this operator ever sells, the new operator must apply for a modification of the CUP to reinstate hours and entertainment. So you state it like that. Could that be subject to challenge? Yes.
It seems on its face, it immediately defeats the purpose of running with the land when you say it runs with the land until you leave, and then you got to have a new application file.
Okay. Well, importantly, the goal of the CUP is not to run with the land. That's just a function of it. So the fact that our goal here isn't to create something to run with the land.
I'm not talking about goals. I'm talking about law, and I'm talking about how CUPs run with the land. Now, if you're telling me you had a case one time where maybe they didn't decide it on that basis. Are you telling me that CUPs don't run with the land?
You can make CUPs not run.
You make it. Is the general law in California that CUPs run with the land?
The general law in California, as I understand it, is unless otherwise stated, the CUPs run with the land. But that I will tell you is not the determining factor, because loads of CUPs require, for instance, CUPs often require a year and a review a year out, a review 18 months out, where the whole CUP may go away or use may have to change. You have the power to revoke or to modify conditions on CUPs. So running with the land isn't anything magic. It isn't anything permanent. It just means that it is not necessarily permanent unless it's personal, unless it's made so.
Well, since we wouldn't know when they might transfer, I don't think you're suggesting that we get to review it every 18 months during the life of their lease, are you?
No, I was just giving that as an example of something that can come back around.
Right, but okay, thank you.
The second question was about CEQA. If you wanted me, I can answer that.
Let's wait till we get into commission discussion for that. Thank you. Do we have any other questions and comments? If you have a follow-up answer, yeah.
All I was going to say is I completely understand your concern, and I don't know if this will allay your concerns at all. Every business that I've opened is still open. I haven't gone out of business. I haven't sold them. I don't have any plans to sell them. I have 2 young children. My partners have young children. I hope my businesses are with my family and their families forever. I plan on having my businesses. My one business has been open 11 years. The other 9, the other 8. I plan to be here if I can for 30 years. I understand that doesn't help when it comes to the CUP, but when it comes to me,
I know.
I plan on being here a very long time. If it was up to my wife, I'd move here tomorrow.
All right, thank you for that. Any other final questions for the applicants at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. I'm going to close the public input portion of the hearing, and we're going to move to commission discussion, but I'd like to turn to the town attorney and maybe get some comment on the CEQA question.
Okay. And it's important to understand 2 things when listening to my response. One is that there is a difference between environmental impacts and impacts. In other words, secondary impacts like drunks and disorderly conduct and things like that. And secondly, the commission ultimately can determine whether or not they think the staff is right in identifying categorical exemption. Categorical exemptions are used generically to talk about exemptions from doing a mitigated negative deck or EIR. But really what CEQA says in the guidelines is as soon as the agency determines that it could be subject to CEQA, meaning usually it's a discretionary permit, then it shall consider whether an exemption lies. And exemptions are not just categorical. They start out, it's basically 1, 2, 3. Statutory exemptions, which are pretty much the same as categorical exemptions, except they're enacted by the legislature. Second one down is categorical exemptions published by the Governor's Office of Planning and what is it, OPR, and Planning and Research, yes. Yeah, I thought so. I always call it OPR. And thirdly, what they call the general rule or the common sense exemption, which is it can be seen with certainty that the discretionary permit in question does not have any effect on the environment. The easy ones are like, something inside of a building or something like that. So what staff has done is they picked out a category exemption for existing facilities. It's almost presumed in CEQA, even though we can all think of uses that do have effects on the environment, that the expanse of a use hours or something does not have an environmental effect. We can all think of some that might. But that particular category exemption would allow, in this case, I think the square footage of the facility is about 4,000 square feet, around about 5,000. Theoretically, it could be before you asking to go up to 50% bigger, and it would qualify for the category exemption. So that presumes an expansion of the use. If it's in an area where the building isn't built out on the land, it could go up to 10,000 square feet without triggering anything more than the exemption. In this case, had staff asked me, I probably would have encouraged them to use the third one down, which is the common sense one, because it's change in hours. And I'll acknowledge to you that change in hours may have some secondary impacts, but CEQA believes it won't have any environmental impacts. So that is their conclusion under that particular section.
Commissioner O'Donnell, yeah.
Follow up on that. There are 5 things being asked for here, as I recall it. There are hours of operation, increase in the number of seats, allow live entertainment, have your movable bar, which I call a floating use, and limit it, suggestion, to 1 user. So there are 5 things. The CEQA test is always, whether the key consideration is whether the project involves negligible or disjunctive, no expansion of an existing use. If you focus merely on the expansion, which is the square foot argument, you ignore the negligible. And what is being sought here is a conditional use permit, not a zone change. And I think we are charged with deciding tonight whether we have enough evidence to suggest to us that we do not have the potential for a reasonable argument being made of a significant adverse impact. And I just want to make sure council is not telling us we don't have that to consider.
Well, I'm telling you, I think in staff's opinion, including legal opinion, you do not have that. As I indicated, I would have probably told them to go under the common sense or the general rule exemption, that it doesn't have that ability. Again, it's the effect on, and like I said, the commission can disagree. But you're talking about the effect on the environment. We're not talking about illegal patrons, because that's not an effect on the environment. That's a secondary impact that we have to manage. But in terms of what CEQA envisions, I can tell you expansion of hours is not what CEQA envisions as effect on the environment. Now, if you had a situation where you had a size of facility that was a minor league baseball stadium, and you were going to have concerts, instead of baseball games being over by 10, and you were going to expand the hours till 2 a.m. to have concerts every weekend, that may produce an environmental impact, I would agree. But this particular exemption, I would even drop down number 3 and just say, under the general rule, it doesn't apply. Under this one, because it presumes that you could go up to theoretically 10,000 square feet in additional space, at minimum 2,100 or 2,500, that the expansion of the hours probably doesn't. But again, the commission can disagree with that.
Can I just follow up with one final question?
Sure.
I appreciate that my argument doesn't meet the common sense test. But it does appear to me that we're talking about more than hours when we say that we're increasing the capacity, we're having traffic impacts, we don't even know what they are, but we're to cede that to somebody else to make that decision. We're going to have now permitted noise. We're going to have all kinds of physical changes. And your common sense tells you there would be negligible or no adverse impact on the environment because it is a square footage thing in your mind. Is that correct?
Well, what's most important is my common sense, and it's referred to, it's called the general rule, but it's also called the common sense test. But it's not important what mine tells me, it's important what yours tells you. So if the commission believes that all those things together, collectively, and obviously, as the commission knows well, the cumulative impacts are important. If you think that does rise to the level of creating a environmental impact which has not been addressed by staff, and again, the standard is fair argument there could be a significant impact, but that's the standard. If the commission feels that way, then you can express that.
Thank you. So let's perhaps go ahead and address this issue first of the CEQA, and I take it from your comments that you disagree with the fact that it meets this categorical exemption.
Well, it depends. If we were to continue with the same use, I would say it ought to be categorically exempt because there's no change. And if it was permitted and the permit has not been The permit has not been abandoned. I think there are many jurisdictions, there's a 2-year limit before it's abandoned, and this has been closed since May, so I'm assuming that permit still exists, and this is a modification of the permit. So the only real question is, what are the changes? Now, the staff has recommended denial. Obviously, you don't have to worry about categorical exemptions. We could, of course, deal with something about what is the size of this, which also might avoid the categorical exemption, but I will tell you right away that if we were to go from whatever the 120 or whatever it is right now to 197 or whatever that is, I could not say that might not have. The standard is a reasonable argument, or an argument could be made of a significant or an adverse impact. I too have litigated these matters, and I can tell you that that argument has been credible. So it really depends where we go. But if we were to say 197 now, and some of these other things, I would think I would not be able to make the findings for a categorical exemption. So that only speaks to that one issue. There's a lot of things here.
So perhaps we go down the list of issues and see where the commission's leaning on each of those, and then at the end, if it comes up, then we'll revisit the CEQA issue. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to maybe go down the way staff has it outlined: hours of operation, hours of patio operation, location, hours of alcoholic beverage service, number of seats, and live entertainment. And maybe take one at a time, get input from the commission on each of those items, and then from that maybe we can formulate, someone could formulate a recommendation if we see perhaps we're all on the same page or not. So let's start with hours of operation. So they're requesting 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. 7 days a week, which is in direct conflict with our alcoholic beverage policy. So I, for one, would have trouble recommending anything that differs from that policy. But I'd like to hear from my other commissioners. Commissioner Telesfor.
I would also have trouble being diverted from that policy as well, especially in this location, because this is our downtown location, where it's, we really are still trying to preserve our small town character, and this is actually kind of going beyond what I would think of as small town. Not that we're not sophisticated and like our, restaurants that are high end, et cetera, et cetera. So I couldn't approve of that either. And 7 days a week, no.
Any other comments on hours of operation? Commissioner Machichi? No, Commissioner Machichi. So, I'm sorry, microphone.
Damn it. So anyway, my feeling is they have to be competitive to exist and to do well in this town. So the town council should consider whether this fits into the same category as these other 5 or 6 establishments.
But to summarize, since your mic was off, that you feel that their request does have some merit.
Yes.
To be competitive with these other bars and restaurants that have hours to 2 a.m.
Instituting the precautions to make it safer too, as well.
Okay.
As well as keeping the noise levels down. So.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, I first was going to say I agree with Mr. Machichi's original position, but now it's become a little more sophisticated. He originally said he just didn't think we had the authority to do it, and I agree with that position. However, I think it's not bad to say to the council, however, perhaps you should revisit that policy, and that's what Commissioner Machichi is saying. And I'm certainly not against revisiting the policy. I just don't know that under the application as we say, I would find this application the reason to reconsider it. I think in general, we want to make sure that our policies, statutes, ordinances, or whatever are up to date. So I'm totally there. But here, I think this use is too intense. I think the changes have not been properly evaluated. I don't like leaving so many things up to somebody else. I don't know why it's before us if ultimately the key decisions are yet to be made and yet to be detailed. So the simple thing is I don't think we have the jurisdiction or right to go against the policy of the council. But insofar, and I know they do listen to what we say, I would not change the policy because of this application.
Thank you. Commissioner Sack?
Okay. I think we've all stated that we would not recommend going against what's stated against the policy, so I'll also reiterate that. But I actually differ in that I do think that if hours of operation were to be revisited, this is a particular use and location where extending the hours to 2 a.m. makes sense, specifically because it's adjacent and right across the street from 2 other establishments that go until 2 a.m. 7 days a week. And just for, I think as Commissioner Machici said, just to make yourself more competitive, I see that extending to those hours makes sense.
Okay, so we have, I think, consensus on what to do, but not necessarily the reason for doing it. So, okay, are we ready to move on to hours of patio operation? The current CUP is 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week, and they're asking to go till midnight 7 days a week. Anyone have any comments or concerns about that item?
Don't they say they agree with staff's recommendation?
Yeah, which was what, 11, I believe?
So I don't think that's an issue anymore, I guess.
Well, it's still a change from the existing CUP, which is 9. So, Commissioner Sayak?
I actually think making the hours earlier is a benefit because it seems like to service a lunch crowd and possibly a brunch crowd on weekends is something that would be a benefit. That's something that I think we are lacking on that street. And since they agree with the staff recommendation of extending it to only 11 p.m., I would be comfortable with the hours of patio operation. So just to specify 9 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Anyone else have any comments on that item? Do we have consensus, nodding heads that 9 to 11 is doable? Okay, location. Oh, Commissioner Telesfor.
I could agree with that. You know what I wanted to ask? Do we have the opportunity here to? Do we have what they're getting do we have any trial periods on any of this? Since we're changing hours of operation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we can recommend that to
okay, later.
council.
Okay. Thanks.
I wanted to get consensus on these, or opinions on these 5 main items first, and then we'll open it up and you can make any motion you wish.
Okay.
Location and hours of alcoholic beverage service. So they're asking for, this is the 50-50 split issue. Anywhere within the establishment. Commissioner O'Donnell.
It wasn't clear to me precisely what they were really asking for. I mean, I think it makes sense to say, you know, your lunch people may be different than your dinner people, although I don't think that's what they're saying. So if I understand them correctly, they're not asking for a change in location for lunch or dinner. What I heard them to say, but I'm not sure if anybody else heard it, they were saying at some point in the evening when you kind of switch over more to the entertainment, maybe serving dinner and all that, but you have entertainment, then it might make sense to have a different configuration. And that makes sense to me. But all I would say is that we probably ought to pin that down a little bit, because when I read the staff report, it was sort of like floating. And I don't think that's what they're asking for. They're not saying, well, on Tuesday we might have it this way, on Thursday we'll have it some other way. So if what they're really asking for is what I just suggested, I would not have a problem with that.
Commissioner Sayak.
I would have to agree with that. That's what I did here. And one of the questions I have for staff is when a CUP is approved, I know we have a layout. Is it possible to have a layout with different times, like this is a lunchtime, this is post 10 o'clock and beyond, so that you can calculate whether or not that 50% is met. So, but you still have that flexibility depending on what kind of a meal service the applicant is looking towards.
It's certainly possible. Staff would like to note, however, that the flexibility in the floor plan would also potentially occur during the daytime when the applicant had company events, perhaps those company events where they would have alcoholic beverage service without meals in various areas of the restaurant would occur during lunch, perhaps. So you would want to take that into consideration when including times.
So it sounds like that flexibility is there. It's just sitting down with the applicant to envision all the different layouts possible and making those calculations.
The flexibility is certainly possible.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I just think we do have to be careful. That is what the staff originally said, and that was what bothered me. It was like, well, we have a new deal, and we've got IBM coming in, and they'd like to have this part, and then, well, we've got a new group coming in, and they'd like to have that part. It makes enforcement a nightmare, I think. So if somebody can come up with a reasonable suggestion, which is to say, look, if somebody takes over the restaurant or whatever, then here's probably where they're going to do it. If we could have something that you could check on so you know what we've just said, I would support it. If it's so vague that it just says, don't worry about it, as long as we have 50%, you're okay, and if you ever want to know whether we got 50%, we'll figure it out for you. I don't like that. So if they have some certainty on what 50% means, I don't have a problem with that.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on that item? Commissioner
Yeah,
Machici?
I'm not totally clear. I'm not totally clear on it, but it seems to me if they have food service required for over 50% at any time, what does it matter where it's at? I guess I don't understand the logic there.
All right. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Logic that I see is I have observed that in the past, when we've approved serving liquor only with food, you'd be surprised how that turns out, and maybe you wouldn't be surprised. And that, to me, is somewhat of a visual enforcement issue. And if you simply say, well, you serve food 100% of the place, and therefore guess where we're serving liquor tomorrow, why bother? Why not say you can serve liquor anywhere we serve food? And that's, it's kind of confusing to me. And so I'm just saying, if somebody wants a variation on that theme, I'd like it to be clear enough so it sounds the same each time it's played. That's all.
So it sounds like there's some openness to the flexibility, but we want it nailed down and better defined as to when and how, is what I'm hearing from most people. Okay. So, yes.
Staff would just like to add to that conversation that staff did have some concern about the flexibility initially because the alcoholic beverage policy says that for restaurants with separate bars, food must be served with alcoholic beverage service in the dining area. So something also to consider is whether or not that flexibility would be consistent with the alcoholic beverage policy.
So they would just have to define where their dining area is.
No, they have to
No,
serve food.
they have to serve.
They dine all over.
Yeah,
100%.
they have to serve food. They serve food everywhere. So,
Got 100% dining, okay?
right.
And you can serve liquor, what they're asking for is less than 100%. What was the problem again?
To take an example, the existing CUP clearly defines the dining area versus the bar area. And so for a restaurant with a separate bar, they're not required to serve meals with alcoholic beverages in the bar area. However, they are required to serve meals with alcoholic beverages in the dining area. In this case, the dining/bar area is defined in various locations in the proposal. If you have that flexibility, the existing labeled dining area would then change to the existing labeled lounge and bar area. So you have a consideration to make that to be exactly consistent with the alcoholic beverage policy. You would essentially be changing where that dining area is labeled.
If the policy is that you have to know where your dining area is, and if in fact you define the area of your dining so that it is a movable thing, then you say, well, where's the dining because we're doing the 10 o'clock stuff. Where's dining at 10 o'clock? It's here, and you can apply that policy, so you're not varying from it. If you didn't know where the dining was, or if the dining was always rooted in one place, then you would have the problem you're saying. I think we're saying we want to know where the dining is so we can know about the liquor, so we can be in compliance with the policy. So a long way around, I think we can all agree. I think I'm agreeing with you, but obviously I think verbally. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. So, Commissioner Telesfor?
Yeah, just so I understand it. So it seems like the floating food area is really, if you think about it, to support the DJ or entertainment that would come in, because as we learned, the area with the 32 seats in the first box on the left of the restaurant would be for dancing. And so the food area service would have to be on the other side. Otherwise, we would just have a bar. We would have a bar serving food instead of a restaurant bar serving food. Now, is that sort of, what do you think? Is that
You're on the right track.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay, is that the common sense? Okay, that's what I thought. So where do I stand on that?
All right, yeah.
I'm not sure
You're
where
not sure.
I stand on it. I just
Okay.
think that food needs to be available all the time.
And it is.
And it is.
And it is.
I guess.
So, okay. The next one is seating, and what looks like the changes that staff are recommending are being agreed to by the applicant. So I don't know that we necessarily, it's the 166 without traffic and the 192 with traffic. I guess the question is, are we comfortable moving forward with that, with a traffic study that hasn't been done yet? So Commissioner O'Donnell.
That was one of the things I was not comfortable with, because the reason they would need a traffic study is because they think there might be essentially a significant impact by the traffic, which normally would be covered by CEQA, which we're avoiding by saying the common sense rules suggest that clearly there couldn't be an adverse impact, let alone make an argument about it. But we want you to do a useless traffic study. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So if you go 166, I think it's not, let's assume for the moment that's not a change. But if you go to 197 or 192 and you only do that dependent upon a traffic study, then you're saying there may be a significant impact, in which case we've just bypassed CEQA by going categorical exemption. And I don't think you can do that. So I would support the lower number. The problem I even have with the lower number, I'm trying to remember at the moment, but doesn't the existing CUP permit something like 120?
Mm-hmm.
So we're
Correct.
saying, oh, you know, it's only 166, which one can wonder what traffic is going to be generated by 46 seats, but we don't want to go to 197. So I'm not exactly sure where all those numbers come from. But at some point, you're going to have a traffic impact. And they're saying you don't need a traffic study when you go from 120 to 166 because that's factored in, and I'll assume that to be the case. But clearly it is not factored in that you would go to 192. So I would support the 166. I would not support the 192 without revisiting the CEQA issue.
What hours are the traffic impact times?
So the peak hours would be 4 to 6 p.m.
4 to 6 p.m.?
And in
Unless you're downtown in the evening and you're trying to find a parking spot after that. I mean, for all of us who live here, if you go downtown Los Gatos on many evenings, the high, well, Los Gatos got problems many hours, but it doesn't, it's not a commuter traffic problem you have on many nights of the week if you want to go out to dinner. So I would suggest to you that the intensity of the uses, and this is a wonderful proposed use, but hopefully it's going to generate traffic. Otherwise, they're going to make any money. So
I was just asking what the hours.
Yeah, I know, but I'm suggesting to you, I don't know that that's relevant in this particular case.
Did someone else have their hand up on that item? Commissioner Sayak?
My only point was,
I just wanted to ask staff where the 166 came from. Is it based on square footage or number of seats from a restaurant?
The 166 comes from the existing 120 plus 46 seats. At 46 seats, it does not trigger a traffic study. And so because a traffic study was not completed, staff is recommending that it be limited to that number of seats at this time.
And those numbers, those are just the standard numerical numbers we apply to any application. Restaurant applications, I guess I should say.
Those numbers were derived using the standard calculations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, Commissioner
Actually,
Sack.
so then, since you're looking for comments on that, I think I would also support, when this goes to town council, 166 without the traffic study, but certainly after that, if you're looking between 167 to 198, the traffic study, dependent on what the traffic study said, I completely agree with Commissioner O'Donnell, that could lead to certain environmental impacts which we can't even anticipate because we're not doing that study. So one is related to the other, and so I would leave it to staff and the applicant to decide at what seating number they're hoping to move up towards, and what requirements you want to bring with that.
Ms. Bailey, do you want to comment on that?
If the commission is open to it, we could modify that condition to determine that to increase the seats above and beyond the 166, that the traffic study would, if there was any impacts, of course that would be a problem, and then we would send it back to you. The condition right now says we may approve it, but if there is an impact, like if the level of service decreases and things like that, that would be an impact, and staff could not support that approval. So we could modify that condition to clarify that. Typically, we're anticipating that the only mitigation measure would be traffic impact mitigation fees. Anything above and beyond that, then would be a significant impact that you would need to evaluate.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Traffic certainly is a concern. But the other concern I have is lines. More successful
Lines.
is inclusive,
Lines.
the more people it will,
Microphone.
more people it will generate. So you not only have a traffic issue, for which you can do a traffic study, but I've never heard of a pedestrian study. The reason I mentioned downtown San Jose is that when I go down there to the California Theater, when you leave a performance at, let's say, 10 o'clock on a Saturday evening, you've got people lined up all over the place with their entertainment centers down there. And I suppose that means they're successful. We know there's somebody going to be standing in front of this building saying, please walk around to the back. And the more successful they are, the more people are going to walk around to the back, and then those people are going to go where? Well, as long as they fit upstairs, they're going to go upstairs. If they don't fit upstairs, and I know they do this in San Jose, they queue until some opening occurs. You've got a lot of people standing around downstairs who may have already started their drinking. That's, to me, is not an aesthetic issue. It is an environmental issue. So I think it's great that staff, maybe does a traffic study and says we're perfectly happy with it, and we don't ever see it again. But I don't think that is the only issue. I think that I have no idea what an increase from 120 to 197 seats would be, but it suggests to me that if there's any turnover in this place, and it's going to be a bar, essentially what it's going to be in the evening, you aren't going to have that simple mathematical equation. You're going to have a multiple in there. And I don't know that that makes downtown Los Gatos an attractive place if you've got people queued up in the back who may or may not have started their drinking. So I would be troubled if we said, well, you go ahead and do a traffic study, and if you're happy with it, we're happy with it.
And I think that segues right into our next issue, which is the live entertainment. So they're asking for a DJ 7 days a week and then a band on occasions monthly, I believe. So Commissioner Telesfor, your comment, and then let's talk about the live entertainment.
Okay. So thank you, Tom, for that comment, by the way. But also, with the additional traffic, is the parking requirement at 166 and it doesn't meet the requirement? Where are we with that? Because originally the proposal was for 198. So at 166, what are we doing with the parking?
The use does meet parking requirements at 166 seats. To actually meeting parking requirements, they would meet parking requirements up to 192 seats as the mix of existing uses on that property exists today.
Okay, because in the report it says that it does not.
As proposed, it does not. So at
216.
Correct.
Okay. Which 216 was on their drawing of their plan.
Correct.
Originally, okay. Oh, and then there was one other, and one other thing, I have to go back, the patio hours, I really don't agree with the 11 o'clock because of the number of people that would be allowed on that patio at any one time, and that noise does travel up and out, and so I'm very conscientious of the fact that there is a neighborhood right there, and so I would not agree with that, that at this point in time until we saw what was happening.
Any day or just the weekdays?
If you push me, I could probably go Friday, Saturday.
Just want to know.
All right. What about the live entertainment? Anybody have any comments on the live entertainment and the request for DJ? In lieu of us having a entertainment policy in place. Commissioner Sayoc.
At the very minimum, I would defer to the staff recommendation, which was the 6-month trial period. The applicant had requested that it apply only to the band, but because they are a new applicant to our town, and it sounds like they may not have any problems anyway, I would prefer the 6-month trial period to be applicable to both the DJ as well as the band.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
The only comment I would make on that, I think generally I agree with that. I'm wondering if we should have a full cycle, i.e. a year as opposed to 6 months, because I feel more comfortable, and it wouldn't be more onerous to them, whether it's 6 months or a year, I don't think. But we'd go through one whole cycle of what happens in, with the seasons and holidays and all that kind of thing. So that's my only suggestion.
Any other comments? Commissioner Machici.
Question to staff. Would neighborhood complaints trigger a review of the CUP?
It could. It wouldn't necessarily. If we could
How could it?
If we could not resolve the issues that brought about the complaint at staff level, we may bring it forth to the Planning Commission and Town Council. Correct.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Just in response to Commissioner O'Donnell's, 1 year is fine with me.
And for live entertainment, I agree with the 1 year. Commissioner O'Donnell, you had another comment to make?
I just want to say on that, taking away a use permit. Once the use permit vests and you get complaints, it's hard to take away a use permit. If, in fact, the use permit is conditioned upon, for example, we're talking about a year and whatever, then it would be a lot easier, because that's part of the deal. In other words, something's supposed to not occur during that year, and I assume we specify that. But I just wanted to be sure everybody understands that once you get a use permit that doesn't have that kind of condition in it, then it's hard to yank a use permit because it's a vested right. So I just want the record to be clear on that.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Sayoc and Commissioner Machici.
The thing with the entertainment, what makes me confident with the year is it sounds that concurrent to this, staff will also be doing an entertainment policy. And since all of this is reliant on the council's approval, their thoughts on how entertainment should take form would hopefully be clear and clarified with that entertainment policy. And so whatever happens within that 1 year, hopefully would be settled and would be in place by the time the CUP is vested.
Commissioner Machici.
Just to clarify, we're asking for a one-time review at 1 year or a yearly review?
We haven't asked.
I mean, that would be up to the...
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Staff recommendation was once, right?
Just once, one time?
Yeah. Okay, we've gone through kind of the major issues. Commissioner Telsor.
Yeah, you didn't hear from me. Entertainment, and there's no one that likes entertainment more than I do, and music, et cetera, et cetera. But I think 7 nights a week of a DJ is excessive for all the reasons that we talked about before, is that, not, this, it's what do I want to say? It's taking what we have currently in our downtown, which we like to think of as this small town character, into another level. And I would like to, I wish we could do it gradually. And I don't know how we would do that, but I am very uncomfortable with 7 nights a week.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Machici?
I missed, I probably misread it, but I know Number One Broadway has entertainment. Do they have restrictions like Hannigan's, like no amplified music and so forth? Do we know? And are there any restrictions on this entertainment?
So Number One Broadway is allowed to have live entertainment. There were some businesses that were approved many, many years ago that with their conditional use permit approval were allowed to have live entertainment. Number One Broadway is one.
I know. Do they have any no amplified requirement, though?
No.
So they can amplify?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
But as I understand this application, one, the windows do not open, we were told. It wasn't clear to me whether they were double paned or what they were, but
it was a noise.
If we assume that the DJ is inside and the music is inside, I mean, I don't care if they have it 7 nights a week. All I would be trying to do is not bother people with loud noise, and there is a noise ordinance, and it kicks in at a higher or a lower decibel level after 10, I think it is, whatever the hours are. So if it's inside, not on the patio, 7 days a week, I wouldn't bother.
Won't bother me either.
Okay. So we've gone through kind of the major issues that have been outlined by staff. Are there any other issues commission members want to talk about, or does someone want to go ahead and venture a recommendation this time? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Can we get either discuss, or I think discussing would be better, just the nature of what we're doing is a little complex, because as I said before, when I've gone through this and tried to figure out, what we're doing, again, I count, I think, about 5 things. One is the hours of operation issue. One is the increase in the number of seats. One is the live entertainment issue. One is what I call the floating bar issue, the floating liquor issue. And the other one is how you limit this to somebody that you think is a great user, so to speak, like these people come across as. So if we do that in, for example, one motion, it's going to be, an interesting motion, I think. And I guess I have also a question, because as I've said before, I am not going to, well, depending on what we do, I may be in a position of saying I don't think it's categorically exempt, and everybody else may think it is. I would not like to be against the motion itself, but since we have to make findings that is or recommendations that is categorically exempt, blah, 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 I would just hope we could make the resolution such that it's separable or severable as to issues that we might be in disagreement about. That might be more helpful, I would think, to the council.
So we could make recommendations, and perhaps the town attorney could help us with this. We could make recommendations on each aspect of the, if there are 5 issues that we have and we're in agreement on 4 of them and one of them we're not, we can make recommendations on each of these issues?
Yes, I think we've all been kind of keeping score over here, so you can just go back on each one and
comments have already been made.
Maybe take a straw motion on it, then recommend if it's supportive of CUP, and the staff will ferret that out. And if you turn, I think, and I'll turn to Jennifer, but I think on page 13 of your staff report, it lays it out, it lays part of it out, including separating out the exemption. So you could vote on that or advise the council separately.
I think
that's if we're going to recommend approval, right? I mean, if we're...
Well, you could use that.
Okay, great. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I'm not sure they totally match up, because as I said before,
Right.
I said 5, but they're really 6, because I forgot to mention the categorical exemption. So if you add that as the first step, the sequel issue, you get 6 things. We've got 5 recommendations here, and they may be 5, but I'm not quite sure why I get 6 and you get 5. So, but the first one they have is categorically exempt, which matches. That was required findings to go to CUP. I guess that's where the breakdown comes. It is not a simple request on the CUP because there are multiple things being asked for, and you have to break that down.
Correct.
I think this is helpful, but it doesn't deal with that issue.
I'm sorry, microphone again, please. Commissioner Machichi.
We get as bad as me. My solution to this could be that I might recommend denial based on the fact that the town policy is in conflict with what they're asking for. However, they should take into consideration all the comments made by my fellow commissioners and then do the appropriate thing.
Is that a motion?
I'm wondering if that could be a motion.
Yeah, I think that's...
Because that covers the issue of CEQA and gets around it. It's going to fall in the hands of the town council anyway. We're only kidding ourselves to see if we understand it here. So why not go with a denial, understand that we've made comments in support
of certain
what
aspects
they're doing, right? I've heard a lot of support on it, and leave it to the town council then to make the final decision. It avoids the issue of CEQA, and we just move on here, right?
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
All right. And it's seconded by Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Talasfore, you had some comments?
Yeah, two comments. One is about the trial period and everything, and I've heard everything from staff's recommendation, 6 months and then
Ended up with a year.
Well, maybe it should be 6 months on some things and a year on the other. I understand that. I'm just making a comment about.
But since it is a recommendation, I think the consensus of a majority of the commission was a one-time review at a year. I've heard a majority of the commissioners.
Okay, so this commissioner would suggest perhaps on the live entertainment that we check in at 6 months.
The whole
and then
thing
a
in a
year.
year.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's what this one, and then I forgot the rest of I had another comment. Good. I know. See? Interrupted me and I forgot the comment.
Does anyone else have any comments on the motion? So before I call the question, I'd like to say I think you've heard a lot of support up here for your business and your business plan and your approach. So please don't be discouraged by our denial. There are elements of here that we support, and we hope you have a successful business. There are policies in place that dictate our jurisdiction over what we can do. So, but I do think there's also a lot of concern about the intensity of use at that site too. So all of our comments are going to be on the record and incorporated as part of our recommendation to the town council. So all those in favor of recommendation of denial, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Recommendation of denial passes 5-0. Thank you. And we will take, do you have?
Did you want to go through the straw motions on the five items? No.
I think we were going to let our previous comments stand as far as that input.
This matter will be referred to the town council. The matter is tentatively scheduled for the town council meeting of September 7th. Notices will be mailed for the public hearing.
And we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Thank you, everyone. I'll call the meeting back to order. Just for the record, Commissioner Machichi had a personal matter and is now excused, but we still have a quorum, so we're going to proceed with item number 2. And item number 2 is an architecture and site application, 18 Palm Avenue, that is being appealed. That is appeal of a DRC, a Development Review Committee decision to approve plans to construct a new single-family residence and to convert an existing pre-1941 residence to a guest house. And can we get a staff report?
This property is located on the east side of Palm Avenue, and it's one lot south of Hernandez. It's a 16,000 square foot parcel, and it is the largest property on Palm Avenue. The existing house is a pre-1941 residence. The applicant's proposing the same changes to this as there's a pending approval, or there is an existing approval for this property for a two-story residence to convert the existing house to a guest house and to build a detached garage. That approval is still valid until September 15th. The property owner sold the property. The current owner decided not to build that exact project, wanted to change the design, and so that's why a subsequent application came in for a new home and with a different design and slightly different site layout. So the proposal previously was for a guest house. The current proposal is to convert the existing residence to a second unit, because it would retain the kitchen. It would be a second unit, so that requires a second unit permit. That's a ministerial action, but that could be done subsequent. If this project's approved, they would come in for the second unit permit. There was a pool on the property previously. That was removed with a permit and filled in July of this year. So the Planning Commission approved the previous project in June of 2008. There was an appeal involved with that decision. It went to Town Council. Council approved the project in September of 2008, and there was a modification at that time made to the roof line of the house. But then subsequently the property was sold, and the new owners came in with a new application. So we have a valid approval sitting here on one hand, and we have a pending approval that you're considering this evening. The DRC considered the project on June 15th. The decision was to approve the project, and then that was appealed, and I think the applicant will get up or the appellant will get up and state their reasons for why they filed that appeal, so I won't reiterate those at this point. There is a summary in the staff report. The Planning Commission, this current proposal differs in some ways from the previous approved project. It's a two-story residence is a little bit higher than the previous approval. The second unit is a difference. They're proposing to remove 2 trees. Those were evaluated by the consulting arborist. The arborist felt that that was compliant with the town ordinance. Access is from Palm Avenue. The previous project was accessing from the rear alley. The floor area and FAR are similar with both proposals. The cellar element was eliminated. The previous proposal had, previous approval had a cellar. This proposal does not. We did redo the arborist and architectural reviews for this project, so those are new reviews. Those are attached to the staff report for you. In order to approve the project, you need to make a finding that it's categorically exempt from CEQA, that the project's consistent with the residential design guidelines, and that the work is consistent with the Central Los Gatos redevelopment area, and then there are the considerations for review of architecture and site applications. Staff did want to make you aware that we received a late email this afternoon from a property owner. The property across the street at 21 Palm is in a trust, and one of the representatives or the family members said that they didn't receive a notice for the public hearing. We did investigate that. We sent public hearing notices to both the address to occupant at 21 Palm, and we sent it to the address on record with the system that we use. We use Metroscan, which is a county-based system, and we get all that information from the county assessor. So we did send notices in good faith, and I can't explain why 4 notices were sent, and they apparently didn't receive one. I just wanted to alert the commission of that concern from that resident, and that they couldn't be here this evening. And that concludes the report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions, Commissioner Talsfor?
I'm concerned, a question for you is, why is this considered a modification? And not
I know that that was...
The reason I ask that is because the 2 houses are...
Yeah, they're really 2 separate applications, and perhaps that wasn't the correct wording to use. Staff wanted to be clear that we had an existing approval that is still valid, and that we had a subsequent application that was different. But it is, it's an independent architecture and site application, and you should judge it on its own merits.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. So the email you received from the neighbor across the street, did they express any...
They didn't state any concerns other than they wanted to have the application they asked to have the application continued so that they'd have time to come look at the plans and consider the appeal.
Okay, but they didn't have an opinion one way or the other.
They didn't state any specific concerns about the project, no.
Okay. Any other questions of staff at this time? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Just to put that to rest, I take it is the town's position that legally required notice was given, and while it's unfortunate that this particular property owner says they didn't receive it, we have no reason to believe there's anything deficient in the notice.
That's correct. And also the story poles have been up for several months, so I think that's a pretty good indication that something's going on.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to open up the public input portion, and the way we're going to do this is the appellant's going to go first. We'll have 5 minutes, and the applicant will have 5 minutes. We'll open it up to public comment, and the appellant will have 3 minutes final rebuttal, and the applicant then 3 minutes final rebuttal. Yeah, that's how we're going to do it tonight. Applicant gets the last word. Well, why don't you come up to the mic, introduce yourself as the appellant, and we can address this issue. And perhaps, town attorney, would you want to comment on the? So.
Do we want to settle that first, or?
Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself and?
Is my time started yet?
No, it hasn't started yet.
Okay. I'm sorry. It's late. We just sat through 2.5 hours of. I'm Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue, Los Gatos, California, and I am the appellant.
And before you get started, I have a card from Paul Quintana as well, and collectively, you're the appellant.
No, he's going to be reading the letter from the neighbor.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
He's going to be reading the email from Jeff Schrager that Suzanne
that's the
was
one. Okay.
referring to.
Okay.
This doesn't sound like it's on.
Great. That's on. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Have we resolved the procedural issue? Because what I've heard is there are going to be...
No, that's what I wanted to get her concern on the record first. So
Yeah,
state your
my concern is that in the past, as far as I know, with one exception, in an appeal, and this is true at the council level, the appellant has the first say and the appellant has the last say, just like when it's the applicant who is up before the commissioner council. The applicant has the first say and the applicant has the last say. And this was what I was told and reaffirmed today when I spoke with Suzanne.
Is that true?
That was my understanding, was that the appellant got 5 minutes, the applicant gets to speak, anybody else that wishes to speak can talk, and that the appellant got the rebuttal.
Because I just talked to the town attorney prior to the meeting to make sure we got that right. And did you want to comment on
I think the chair has discretion. I think in response to the question, because the applicant is actually the one with the entitlement and just concerns about due process, I don't think there's any error in giving both the right to rebuttal.
Well,
but you can certainly decide to let the appellant go last.
But since that's what was told that would happen tonight, that's what we're going to do.
Right.
So we're going to have, you'll go first, the applicant will go next, we'll have public input, then the applicant, and then the appellant will finish up, 3 minutes each at the end.
Okay, but the reason I have an objection to that is because there is a multi-page desk item that I was not really prepared to respond to, and I think it does need some response. And if he has 2 turns to speak, then I may not have the opportunity to both address what I wanted to address and address the issues that he's raised. But we'll see. Okay.
All right.
Okay. We ready?
Yep, we're ready for you to start.
Okay.
We're going to go with how I stated it, as both getting, you're going to go 5 minutes. Applicant will have 5 minutes. We'll take public input. Then he'll have 3 minutes to rebut anything he's heard, and then you'll have 3 minutes to finish up.
Okay. The project ANS application S1011 that is being appealed today is essentially a different project than the one approved in 2008. Whether it is considered a modification of a previously approved project, which was ANS application S-07211, or a new project, the issues and questions that are raised by it remain the same. I'd also like to point out that even though they're the same, I think there is some question about the noticing because the DRC notice was for a modification and this notice is for a new application. Again, I think the issues are exactly the same. Most of the questions or issues that I raised in my letter related to neighborhood compatibility, whether the neighborhood it was consistent with the predominant neighborhood patterns, and although a few related to process as well, and also whether it was consistent with the residential design guidelines. And the residential design guidelines, they state in their purpose that they are to ensure that new development is compatible with its surrounding neighborhood and provides a greater degree of project approval predictability. Both of those are stated in the purpose. And that's one of the reasons I appealed it also, is that the previous project, which I don't think had as many impacts as this project, was referred from DRC to the Planning Commission. It didn't have to be appealed. And I have a couple of statements I'd like to make, and that is that there are some errors in my letter to you. For one thing, the date of the original project is wrong. The approved project, it should be June 15th instead of June 25th. Secondly, I would like to state that I really goofed with the DRC meeting. It wasn't that there was nobody there at the meeting. I intended to attend. I arrived at 9:30, which for some reason I had in my mind was the start date. Actually, I arrived earlier than that. And so the project had already been approved. So that was my recourse. I was pretty comprehensive, I think, in my letter to you, and I'm not going to repeat everything that I said, but I would like to bring up a few more issues that I don't, or questions that I did not in that letter because I wasn't aware of them actually. And that is, there's a difference between the approved plans from DRC and the Exhibit 10 in your packet. One thing that I noticed was that the different size of the pool. I don't know if there are other differences. Also, the change in the parking requirements from 2 to 4, that was a real surprise. We had made some recommendations to the Osbornes regarding the garage, changing it from a 3-car to a 2-car since they didn't intend to use it at a parking space. We never would have made that recommendation had we known there were four parking spaces that were required, because that requires the extra driveway length around the carport. Also, the question of why the siding was changed from wood to fiber cement. The conditions for this project regarding fire and wildfire and defensible space are exactly what they were for the previously approved project, which was wood. The impermeable surface calculations, I question how they were done. It appears to me that the porches and decks were not included, and no consideration was given to the fact that porous cement is not 100% permeable. It's somewhere between 40 and 60%, and that would affect the calculations on that particular item. Okay, this is the end. Maybe because I lived here for 30 years on Palm Avenue, I think it is special and unique. It is only 1 block long, but it likely houses the greatest concentration of Victorian homes on any street in Los Gatos. 8 of the homes are Victorian, and of those 4 have been on the historic tour. And one of them is a designated landmark. the Taylor House at 55 Hernandez was also at one, let me finish my sentence.
Yeah, please go ahead and wrap up.
18 Palm at one time was part of the parcel for the Taylor House, so it was associated with that landmark. And so I'm just asking you to uphold the appeal, consider the letter from our neighbor, Jeff Schrager, and direct the applicant to make some significant design changes to be consistent with the design guidelines, the neighborhood patterns, and neighborhood compatibility.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of the appellant at this time? Commissioner Talasfor.
Right. Ms. Quintana, did you recommend a redesign? Is that what you are recommending?
Yes, I am.
And is there one major, can you be, one salient point or two about that design that you would recommend?
It is with the attached carport, arbor, porte-cochere, whatever. It is much wider than any house in the neighborhood. It covers about 76 feet. The house itself, without the attached carport, actually is about 5 feet narrower than the previous house, but it's also about 5 feet taller. The fact that it's taller and narrower, I think, is a good thing, but it's moved the mass towards the front and the back, so there's more mass to the house. There's more volume to the house. It has a 22-foot interior great room, the whole center of the house. And it has, because of where the mass of the house was moved forward with the bedrooms, created the roof peak coming forward and the attic space not being really what you would call attic space, but actually 6 foot 11 feet high with doorways from the interior of the house and windows. So they're not technically living spaces that can be counted, but they're certainly usable, and it's certainly a lot more volume than the previous house. And the square footage, when you look at the total square footage with the secondary unit or guest house, it is just at the maximum FAR. And if you look at the charts that I did, and there's a slight error in one of them, but it's not significant. Clearly, the intensity there is greater.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple questions. First, before I forget it, because you just mentioned intensity, what about the fact that there's no longer a basement element and how that plays into the intensity of use on the site?
Well, since basement elements aren't counted towards FAR, it doesn't play in at all.
But we consider them when we're talking about intensity, which is what I think the word you used.
What I was referring to was the mass, the scale,
Okay.
the fact, the porte-cochere, the driveway, so that the actual landscaping setbacks on the north side is less than 8 feet. On the south side is only 8 feet. So for such a wide lot, it takes up visually a lot of it. Plus the pine tree, which has been a prominent feature in the street, is coming down, so that the whole aspect of the street will change and the house will stand out. And actually, I think may compete with the landmark house. I'd like to say one thing that I didn't say, which was this isn't an issue of architectural style, except as it applies to meeting the design guidelines. But architectural style by itself is not the issue. There are also 4 trees coming out, not 2. The other 2 are smaller, but they're coming out.
And so if I could follow up with another question. You said you felt this design had more impacts than the previous design. And then you went on to talk about things like the parking change and the wood to the the fiber cement and the pervious materials, and were those the elements you're talking about that increased the impact in your opinion?
The increase in impact is taking out the pine tree, which, it's hazardous where it is to that house where it's sited. The change in the addition of the porte-cochere carport that is actually integrated into the architecture of the house, so it expands the presence of the house more than other houses on the street. The increased volume, the bringing the mass forward, the fact that the previous application at council direction and your direction had broken up the mass of the house, pushing the two sides back. And, we have, I think, and the huge amount of increase in hardscape over the previous, and the change in the access to the garage. By putting the garage access in front, it really limits the opportunity to do any screening for the house directly across the street because of the driveway, and the little area that there is where the utility undergrounding is going to be, so there's very little opportunity there. And the applicant had offered to put hedges on the southeast side to help block the view from our front porch, but they're so close to the oak tree that they're not going to, it's not a viable option. And I would also say that at this point, I'm not concerned about the screening. I'll take care of it myself. It's the other issues that I think are more important, and it's fitting into the neighborhood. I think the other house fit in. I think this one wants to stand out.
Thank you. Any other questions for the appellant? Okay, seeing none. The applicant, I have a card for Mr. Jeremy Osborne, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay. Justice. Good evening. I'm Jeremy Osborne. My address is 1324 Dale Avenue in San Jose, 95125. So I am the applicant and the builder for this property. I'm a licensed general contractor. I mention those credentials because I'm also the son involved in this property. The owners are mom and dad, who are referred to as Dave and Georgia Osborne from this point forward. So obviously I'm very involved in this project, a little more so than I do with some of my other properties. And this is something that we've been looking for, a property like this for them for well over 4 years now. They've been looking to move closer to downtown. They live on Redberry Drive off of Highway 9 right now, and looking for something that they can build and move into for the rest of their lives. This will be their dream home. So with the purchase in June 2009, they did acquire a set of plans that were approved, ready for permits, and decided to make some changes to those plans since they are the new owners. And the changes that they made all meet a specific need for what they want to do with the property. We submitted a design in March 2010 that met all major planning, building, and design requirements. And also at that time I submitted or delivered a set of plans to all the neighbors in the surrounding properties and asked for any concerns or feedback, and did have some feedback and conversations with the Quintanos and some other neighbors. Some of that was productive, and obviously we listened to all the concerns and went back to the drawing board and came up with as many viable solutions as we could. Some of the concerns or requests that we had would, in our opinion, alter or really change the design and the function of the house in a drastic way that we couldn't accommodate them. But we certainly tried our best to accommodate as many requests as we could. So with that in mind, I was genuinely shocked to find out that we did have any kind of lingering concerns when the appeal was filed. But where we stand now is the plan does comply with all planning, building, and general design requirements. So we're not really asking for any favors or special treatment, just asking for permission to build the plan or build the house that Dave and Georgia would like to build on the lot. I did issue a very late submittal on Monday as a response to Lee Quintana's letter. So I don't know if you've had time to review some of those points or not. So I'll just go over some of the more important items real fast while I have time. First one would be what Lee spoke to as far as the height of the building. It's 27 feet 4 inches at its highest point, which would be shorter than every other home on the street, including the Quintana's own home. The street presence, it's the only lot on the street with a 100-foot wide frontage. Most lots on the street have a 50-foot wide frontage. So the house is designed, the size and scale are appropriate for the lot, we feel. And of course, these same issues were raised with the previous design, same exact issues, over 2 appeals. And both the Planning Commission and Town Council, we agree with their previous decisions on these matters. As far as the porte cochere, I mean, it's in there, but it's not a carport, it's not a garage, it's not an enclosed structure, it's open, you can see through it. It's where it stands, it's set 45 feet back from the street's edge, and there are numerous examples in the neighborhood of similar structures that I've submitted. And then Lee did mention briefly her calculations on the square footage and FAR, and of course I know that was not an intentional mistake to try to skew the numbers, but obviously I think there's a big difference between 99% and 101% with the maximum FAR on a lot. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the applicant at this time? I have a question if no one does. You want to go, Commissioner Sayak? I had a question. You said the design changes, there was a reason for all the design changes, I'm sure. I'm curious why the change in access from the alley to Palm.
Right. That was, we certainly went over several iterations of that. They wanted to have the houses, we did a fair amount of future-proofing on this home. This will be the last house.
I'm sorry, you did a lot of what?
Future-proofing. I'll explain that in a second.
Okay, thank you.
This is the last home that they want to move into. So it needs to be designed with a certain amount of accessibility. Dave is 70 now, and Georgia is 66. So we designed it to be as low to the ground and as flat as possible, particularly on the first floor. All of the essential living area is on the first floor, the master suite, the kitchen, and their office space as well. And there are no step-ups or step-downs in that first floor. So the intent is there is a considerable slope on the lot from the, I guess, the west side to the east, front to back. There's a considerable slope. At the front corner of the house to the back corner of the house, you slope 3 feet. So where the porte cochere is, you would be stepping out of the car and going up probably 3 steps right now, whereas if you pull to the back of the house, you're going up 10 to 12 steps. And moving down the road, obviously that's an issue.
And you couldn't achieve that from access off the alley?
From the alleyway? Well, you would have to pull into the garage, which is a detached structure, and walk up the hill. And certainly, where they are now, they're comfortable with that, and will. I mean, the garage is maybe 10 feet from where it was in the previous plans. The only difference is the driveway, and there is actually a driveway in that spot right now on the lot. The existing lot has a driveway in that same exact spot.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Commissioner Talasfora.
What's the slope of that lot?
The overall slope, I don't know.
Well, I mean, from the garage to the house.
Between the garage and the rear and the house, it does flatten out, but I would, we haven't done any leveling from those. You'd have to look at the
I was out there.
Plan.
I didn't notice that there was that steep of a slope. But
I'm sorry.
There was that steep of a slope when I was out there today.
It's steeper in the front. It's steeper in the front. It does flatten out a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's that much of a difference. It's probably close. I'm going to say it's probably about 3 feet from the back of the house to the rear lot line.
Commissioner Sayak.
So my question is regards to the carport. It sounds like you don't plan to park your car there.
Right.
So really, the question is, what's the purpose then of having that covered area where a driveway couldn't serve?
Right. Well, certainly when it's pouring rain, you can pull out, get out of the car, unload groceries, just get in the house, period, without getting wet. And you can, it's kind of a staging area, if you will, for anything that you're doing before you pull to the back of the lot. It is a considerable walk, and it's certainly manageable for anyone, but it's certainly easier. And I think also with the width of the lot, I think that element sort of kind of completed the design. We certainly went through some iterations without it there, and it didn't look right. And it sort of needed an anchor with the 100-foot wide frontage.
So, it sounds like based on the need of the applicant,
right,
could an attached garage could have then served that purpose, an attached garage that was entering through the alleyway?
I don't. There's not enough room to build a house back there because you have an existing structure. So you can't really attach to the rear and have the house be all the way at the back of the lot, nor would you want to because of the slope of the lot. It's tough to have all your landscaping on a slope like that. So you do have a much more usable area in the rear of the property now that we can flatten out a little bit better. But I guess how else can I'm not sure how else to answer that. Sorry.
Okay. It sounds like though that was something that was suggested and you guys had looked at it as an alternative, or was not?
Doing an attached garage. The only other thing we looked at was doing an attached garage at the front of the lot, which is something that certainly would, for accessibility, would be the easiest option. But they knew it was. We were aware when we closed escrow of all the previous issues and concerns between the neighbors and the previous owners, and we knew that was probably not going to fly. So they tried to compromise and design something that was at least open and see-through, and still met their needs.
Okay, thank you.
And I do remember from the first time we saw the application that one of the recommendations that actually got incorporated was breaking up that front facade and having the two sides pushed back. Mm-hmm. And it looks like you've taken that out. And again, I'm just wondering your rationale behind that.
Well, instead of doing that, we broke the roof line into two separate roof areas. So I think that achieves the same purpose, and also incorporated several dormers and more windows as well.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Talsfor. I'm sorry, were you?
I don't want to belabor this porte cochere
sure.
element, but you said that it would be like a staging area as well. That's what one of the functions is. And so I'm wondering, could that be accomplished? I assume there's a door there, if I remember correctly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That could be accomplished with some kind of a, maybe a partial awning or something
mm-hmm.
to let people in and out of the car and get their groceries in, and then still drive back to the driveway, to the garage, and walk up.
Right. We looked at several options with that. Certainly, when we knew there were concerns over this element, we looked at a lot of other possibilities. We talked about doing a much more minimal arbor and have it be weatherproof in some way, shape, or form. And I ran the architect through several variations, and it just didn't. The scale wasn't appropriate. It was too small, too skinny, and just didn't look right, for lack of a better term. We also played with building it up to try to, shortening it and building it up to try to just make it work. And this is the best option that we have come up with. This is, by the way, this is also a change. The original plan submitted in March was a two-car opening. So you would pass all the way through it as far as possible, and you'd pass all the way through before you went to the back of the lot. And we reduced it to a one-car carport to try to bridge the gap.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. And I have two speaker cards. The first one is Lynn Pacheco.
It's almost bedtime. Is this working?
Yeah.
Len Pacheco, 50 Hernandez Avenue. I live in very close proximity to this project. I've lived on this my property for almost 40 years, and I really am very much concerned about what goes on in my neighborhood. A matter of clarification to Mr. Bourgeois' comment about the first proposal. I was involved in that redesign actually, and the recommendation was to split the mass into 3 parts in order to get it to look less horizontal and more vertical, and we felt that that was successful. That's all gone away. It wasn't clear to me that this was a new project. I was under the impression that it was a modification to the approved design. So I didn't go to the DRC meeting thinking that minor modifications were no big deal. And then when I found out it was really a totally different design, I became concerned. The issue remains the same. It's too wide. It's too much of a box in what should be a historic district. There are a lot of significant homes there, Victorian era homes, that 1880s that are really vertical. Here comes this box with a flat roof crying out. And when the trees are gone, it'll be quite in your face. Anyway, for me, the issue is following the design guidelines. Those of you who've sat on the Historic Preservation Committee with me know how rigorous we are with regard to materials. It's true that this is not a historic district. By reason of the number of historic homes there, it should be considered a historic neighborhood. There are some things that we adhere to, that is the choice of materials. I was really disappointed to see that they're using hardy board. That's something a historic would never approve of. Vinyl or aluminum clad wood windows are certainly something that we're doing now because they've improved so much in the recent past. So I think the guidelines, the residential design guidelines, have been cast aside in this particular case. Point by point. 3 minutes isn't enough to go over them. Very briefly, there was a remodel at Walnut and Hernandez that a group of the neighbors, and I was one of them, that got included, and we worked with the developer, the applicant, and the architect to downsize the mass, and we were able to do it, and the result was a very acceptable to all final house. It's under construction. It's almost finished, and you might want to take a look at that. That's a successful story in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Telesfor.
I'll sort of ask you the same question I asked Ms. Quintana, and that is, are you suggesting a redesign, or are there recommendations or further refinements that you could pinpoint for us?
Well, enough issues have been raised tonight that would warrant definitely a modification to what's being proposed. A little more articulation, a little more attempt at a single design. Right now, it's kind of an eclectic mixed bag of different features. It really will compete with the Taylor house next door. So I'm suggesting that the project be continued, and there be a little more input and a little more respect for the design guidelines. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Well, not exactly. When you speak about the design guidelines, can you pinpoint which?
Well,
we talked about the verticality
of
it. And
reading, it's all in the guidelines. I think reading the street is important. I don't think that's been done.
And I know we don't want to replicate what's on the street, but
right. It's what we're talking about is mass and scale. You know.
Okay.
More articulation, more breaking up of the facade, rather than a straight horizontal box with a flat top. Could be done.
Okay.
Any other questions for the speaker? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the last speaker card I have is for Paul Quintana.
This will do. My name is Paul Quintana. I live at 5 Palm Avenue, not 18 Palm. Thank goodness at this point in time. I was here to speak for Jeff Schrager, who is not here. He's one of my son's childhood friends. His mother was Carol Schrager. We've lived in our house for about 35 years on Palm Avenue. She lived there before we moved in, so she was probably one of the longest residents of Palm Avenue. She's passed away, and Jeff and his brother are the co-trustees of the estate. They sent an email when they found out about this meeting tonight and that the potential passage of what's going on. Their email was definitely unhappy with the notification process. Oops, maybe it's this one should be the one. At any rate, I'm going to briefly tell you that in his email he was unhappy about the notification, did not know anything about this, was informed by Suzanne that there was story poles that had been put up and that they could have known about this had they been visiting the property or whatever. He has felt that he cannot support, or for that matter, be against this project, not knowing enough of it, not having time to review it from the city information on their website, and would request in one of his a possibility of a continuance or something in order to be able for him and his brother to give some input into this project. So the thrust of his communication, which came today, I guess, or yesterday, has been that he felt that it was totally inadequate, that he was not talked to, that he did not know about the project. He was never, as one of the people most heavily influenced or affected by the mass and scale, his comment was never solicited by either applicant or didn't know anything about this, and he would like an opportunity to be able to have some input and would prefer a continuance or a delay or whatever the process might be.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. I have no other comments or cards from the public, so if the applicant, if you so choose, if you wish to come up and make any rebuttals to what you've heard.
Yeah, let me just go down the list of some of the items that have just come up. First of all, the pool size, I think on the plans right now, I think we have sort of templated in a 12 by 12 pool. That design hasn't been finalized in any way, shape, or form. We really don't. I mean, we've done several iterations and haven't come up with anything that anyone was pleased with. So we just sort of tabled it for later discussion. And I guess if that's an issue, we're open to discussion. Fiber cement shingles. I want to point out that we're required to do V-groove siding on this house because of the existing property and to match that exact siding. And specifically with V-groove siding, it's going to have a smooth surface, not the simulated wood grain like you see on some fiber cement siding. And once it's painted, will look. I mean, I'll pay you if you can tell the difference between the two, between natural wood V-groove siding and hardy board siding. Other than the fact that it's straighter, the edge detail is cleaner and it takes paint better. But if it's a requirement that we need to do wood for that reason, we're more than happy to make that change. It's a better product, and I would like to use it, but we're not married to it. Whether the project was treated or approved as a modification or as a new submittal, I understand there's some debate over that. But as applicants, we were just following the request and the procedures. We were just trying to, for lack of a better term, follow orders. And what process we go through didn't really matter. It's still going to be the same house that we would like to build. The trees as well, we are removing the Monterey pine. That really needs to go, and the avocado as well is diseased and in the wrong place, as well as being a fruit tree and not a native species. But I would like to point out that there are two very large oak trees at the front of the lot that are sort of flanking the Monterey pine, and those will fill in over time. And they're very prominent trees. I mean, it's not like we're going to have this blank lot. It's going to have trees. It has a lot of trees actually surrounding it, and obviously we'll be replacing, planting several replacement trees. And again, just want to point out that the frontage on this house is 100 feet wide. It's twice the average of any other lot on the street. the average. Of course, there are some that are slightly larger than 50 feet, but most of them are 50 feet, so it does demand a different type of home, I feel. And again, with the articulation on the roof, part of the reasons for the changes in the roof are the solar panels. And I would just request that the commission consider, the owner's efforts to build a greenhouse and an energy efficient house, and consider those needs as well.
Thank you. Do we have any final questions for the applicant? Commissioner Telesfor.
Are you saying that you couldn't put solar panels on a more pitched roof?
The original plan that we submitted in March had a pitched roof. It had a vaulted section in the middle of the house, and we did have panels on there that were facing the southern exposure. That was one of the concerns that the other neighbor that contacted me, Sean Morley, had, was being able to see those panels. He lives directly across the street. Being able to see those panels from his second-story windows, basically. They're also elevated about 10 feet, across the street. And he didn't want to see too much panel, basically. So we went back to the drawing board on that, and as we looked at that and tried to find a solution, came up with a flat roof idea, which ultimately ended up in increasing the number of panels we have. So it was sort of a win-win solution.
Okay. I have another question on another subject, but when I was out there today, I hadn't been out there for a while, but I am familiar with the neighborhood. I was looking at the houses across the street, which are virtually the neighbors and the neighborhood houses, and that sets the character, it set all of that, right? But what really stood out to me, besides the verticality of the homes, was the use of windows, the use of lighted windows. And every house had lighted windows, I think, except one, and that one was probably an anomaly, so we don't count that, sort of. And I'm just wondering, have you thought about that, or would you be able to, because I was looking at your design and I was thinking that really what makes it appear the style so different and stands out are those windows, and being close to the street like that.
The lack of
the lack of the detail. Is there something?
We have considered it. The part that makes it tricky is the design features that we really like are the eyebrow dormer and some of the arch windows, and especially on the back and the front facade, and those are make it tough to do those lights because they just look real funny on those doors and windows. Yeah, and so we certainly have played around with it, and we're certainly open to that suggestion, and we'll try to make it work.
Okay, you would look at.
We just decided at the end of the day that it looks better without them.
But you would maybe come back with some.
Sure.
Commissioner Telesfor, for some of the more architecturally challenged commissioners, could you describe what a lighted window is?
A lighted window is when there are, across the street are windows that have wood panes in them that
grids.
The detailed grids, they're like grids, and they articulate the windows, so you can either have them on half of a window. Usually they're windows over windows, either on half, or sometimes in that era they did decorative ones that Mr. Pacheco could explain this much more than I could.
Okay, I think we got it. Yeah, thank you.
What we looked at was panes across the top third of the window. And for most of the windows, it looked really good, but it did look really funny on those kind of focal point windows at the front and the back of the house.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I have a fairly general question. I know that I'm not supposed to, nor am I able to design this home, and I don't want to design it. However, the comments that I've heard critical of this home, basically, if I understand them correctly, is it doesn't fit in with the neighborhood. And of course, we are charged with seeing that things fit in. We don't have to design the home to see whether it fits in. But the statement that I would like to hear your response to is, do you think, I mean, I know that you must, but do you think the house fits into the neighborhood? It is one block long, and it has some very nice homes on it. And if you do, could you tell us why? Because we've now heard some pointed comments about why it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'd like to have your thoughts on why you think it does.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start at the beginning here and mention, and Lee's probably going to roll her eyes when I say this, but David and George's original design that they would like to have built would be a French country-style home. So, and they know that they know what the approval was for the previous owners was for a craftsman-style home, and there was a battle over that design style. So, they didn't even consider that style that they would like to go with in any way, shape, or form, and kind of embrace the craftsman style of house that was previously approved, and tried to work with that that design style as much as possible. So certainly, we evaluated the surrounding neighborhood and evaluated the craftsman style home specifically, and trying to take ideas. And I think we've come up with a plan that reflects a lot of the craftsman homes in the area. There are craftsman homes on Ellenwood Avenue that have porte cochere, for example. There are homes on Palm Avenue that have an eyebrow dormer and have arched windows. There are homes on Palm Avenue that have, well, one has a wraparound porch. There are plenty of homes in Los Gatos that have wraparound porches, obviously, and I think that's a great feature of the home. And of course, we're also matching the materials with the existing home, which is a requirement from the previous plan. So we feel like we've done quite a bit of work to try to blend in as much as possible. I don't know if we can really make everyone happy. I mean, I don't think we can make everyone happy, but we certainly have tried.
Thank you.
Commissioner Telesfor.
Right. One comment that was made was that because of your new design, I guess,
right,
that you move the house more forward on the lot, which really increases the visual of the mass and the volume of the house. So how could you, is there a way you could alter that, or do you see that? Do you understand then why there is a concern with the length of the house? Because you not only have the horizontal length of the house, now you have the volume is forward as well.
Right.
So you've put a lot at the front.
Well, the house itself wasn't moved forward. The house, the height of the house was increased. So you have a more pronounced second-story home.
I see.
And part of the reason for that is actually the solar panels. Even with the original plan, you have very large trees in the front, with the Monterey pine excluded, but you have two very large oak trees and also surrounding properties trees. So your exposure to the sun is in the back of the property.
I understand.
So.
Okay, and that would be, well, is there a way to reduce some of the other volume then? You have attics on the two sides.
Mm-hmm.
Can those, I don't know. I'm not an architect, so help me out here.
Right. We've gone through it. We've tried. The attic spaces, there isn't a whole lot of, it's not going to be living space. There's no intention of
I don't know.
Space whatsoever.
I'm talking about articulation and how we could reduce the appearance
right.
of the house really being front-loaded on the lot.
The attic space doesn't affect the articulation whatsoever.
Okay. I don't know how.
No, I understand. No, we moved. We wanted to have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on the second story. We have a large extended family, so lots of out-of-town visitors, and those rooms will get used a lot. So, but the reason why they're shifted to the front of the house is the shading, probably more than anything else. And also, it does. We feel that the visual from the front is appealing. We like it.
It's not that it isn't or is. It's that we're thinking about the compatibility, right? We have to look at that. That's what we're charged with.
Right, and there are second-story homes. Actually, 9 Palms, straight across the street, has a second-story structure, very similar. There's a well-defined second story to that house.
It is, and it's a very vertical house, too.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. And we will call up the appellant.
I'm just going to try to go through as many things that were mentioned as I can, and I want to start out first with the previous appeal. My appeal the previous time was because it was approved by the Planning Commission with the condition that it be modified to articulate the porch, but it wasn't coming back to the Planning Commission. The appeal period is 10 days. If the plans came back longer than that 10 days and you didn't appeal it, you lost your appeal right, so it was to maintain that ability. The plan that was approved by the council was almost exactly what had been worked out beforehand, and the only reason the appeal wasn't withdrawn was because there wasn't time to get the actual modifications reviewed and stamped approved. They weren't stamped approved until after the council meeting, but they were received before the meeting. Okay, so that takes care of that. As far as the avocado trees go, if you read page 4 of the arborist report, the tree is not diseased. In fact, he questions whether, in my mind, he's questioning whether it really needs to be removed, except for the fact that it interfered with the plan. The examples that he gave of houses not in the immediate area, they're blocks away with carports and attached garages, etc. The street on Palm has no attached garages. All the lots on the alley access the garages from the alley, and that's even houses on Peralta that have 6 garages for the one property are all accessed on the alleyway. The alleyway is like that, but you know the precedent is there, and it is the typical pattern. There are 4 houses on Palm Avenue that have frontages that are 75 feet. There are only, I think, 3 that have the 50-foot frontages. So, but the 100 feet is bigger, but it's not twice as big, but the house is occupying proportionally more frontage than other houses. And the steps to the carport, one of the things that we had requested was perhaps if they kept the carport, which we're not in agreement with, was to push it back towards the back of the house and then access it from there. And there are not 10 or 12 steps on the plan for the deck in the back, and we suggested perhaps a walkway. I have one more thing I want to say, if I may, which I just lost.
Well, since you lost your thought, I'll ask you the question. Do you remember the last comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, we made lots of suggestions on how to reduce the impact of the carport. Oh, I know what it was. The staff report says that one of the required parking spaces is under the covered carport. So there has to be the place that goes around it. If that wasn't a required parking space, then if you kept the driveway there, at least it wouldn't be double wide, and there's no other house on the block that has a double wide driveway. And I think that was it. But, you know, looking at the patterns of things, I think there's opportunity to work out something with the garages from the back, which makes more sense because the 2 extra spaces are for the guest house, which is in the back on the alley. And I could think of numerous ways that you could do it and still maybe go through the garage to a parking pad at the back of the house so that you could enter and you would still eliminate the driveway and have the room for the landscaping and to, you know,
Great.
lower some of that impact.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions of the appellant at this time?
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, with that, I will close the public input portion of the hearing and turn it over to my fellow commission members for questions of staff, comments, or perhaps a motion. So we have in front of us an appeal of the DRC decision to approve the plans.
Can I provide one clarification?
Please.
On the exterior materials, when the previous approval was given, we did not have the current wildland urban interface requirements in place. The state fire marshal's office has provided mapping, and the towns adopted the wildland urban interface map. It's a very high fire hazard area. They cannot use combustible materials on the siding. So that's why you're seeing the siding proposed that you are. There's a lot of building restrictions now when you're in the wildland urban interface, and it's imposed by the building and by the fire department, sort of jointly. And there's things like no venting and siding and no eaves. There's all sorts of restrictions now, and it's going to make it pretty challenging when we're dealing with historic neighborhoods. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. So folks are pretty quiet. Commissioner Sayoc, you want to get us started here?
Yeah, I'll get us started. Well, with that segue that Ms. Davis provided, I don't have any particularly strong thoughts on materials or the architectural features. I reserve that for some of my other commissioners who are more knowledgeable and proficient in that area. One area, though, that I do see some concern with, and I did see it with the first house that was approved here, although we're looking at them separately, is just the width of the lot. And I understand that the lot is actually larger than the surrounding neighborhood. But if you are looking at the rhythm and the scale, the thing that has always struck me with this particular lot is how difficult it is to build a home that is not a rectangular box, because your lot is actually rectangular. And so without getting into the design features again, the thing that I kept looking at again and again when I was reviewing this is the carport. And if there were ways, I was like, I was just covering it and saying, well, would this fit in the neighborhood? And I understand the necessity and the ease that would provide to an applicant living there, but I do wonder if there are alternatives available so that is something that could be removed or that would help alleviate the width so that it doesn't just come across as a rectangular box. So that's I guess the sole area and the largest area that I pause when I look at this application.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Unfortunately, these design issues tend to be somewhat, and I mean this with respect, subjective, because when I look at the plan, the addition of, I always have trouble with Port Cochise, I mispronounce it, but it's not a traditional carport. It is a drive-through, however the French want to say it. And it kind of takes away from the box by having the extension, whereas if you did not have that extension, it would be a funny-shaped box because it's got some interesting curvature on it. So I can respect somebody who says, they obviously that does add to the width, but I personally, I would stay away from redesigning the house. And I think to take away that, for me, I wouldn't do it simply because it is subjective. I'm clearly not an architect, and I do happen to think it does take away. If you're saying all that, I happen to think it takes away from the boxiness. But I say that by saying, who am I? I'm not pushing that. I'm just saying that's the way it hit me. So I do agree that it is a difficult neighborhood to make sure that you fit in properly. But there is some variety in that neighborhood. I mean, I do think, for example, the house across the street, were that before us tonight, would have a much greater difficulty than this house. So I'm respectful to people not liking things. On the other hand, we have a homeowner who doesn't like this home and has a very sophisticated tastes and good education to say it, but I don't see any other neighbors here. It's maybe not a house I would build, but nobody tells me to sit around and redesign their home. I think that it does fit in with the neighborhood. I think the fact that the staff did approve it, I give some weight to that. And I respect their expertise. So I don't have that problem with what I will now call the carport, for want of better pronunciation.
Commissioner Talsor.
Yeah, I'll weigh in, and I'm, obviously this is a neighborhood that anyone that could ever live there, I think, they're just so lucky to be able to live there. It's that unique. And it's a neighborhood that really cares. And, I know there weren't more neighbors here tonight, but, that's our job too, isn't it? We have to be the caretakers and the ones that really look out for all of us who are in this town. And we try to do the best we can. And we use not our own opinions, but we use our guidelines, which are residential guidelines, and right here, relate building front and side setbacks to those on adjacent parcels, provide front facade articulation similar to those. And that's where, as we heard tonight, that's where I think the differences are with this home. How that can be further achieved, I don't know, but I do have hope, and I do think it can be further achieved. And I'm not sure how to do that. I'm not the designer, but it can be done, and I do think it needs further refinement. And I think you sound like the builder, designer sounds like he has worked hard on this, and I have a feeling that upon hearing this tonight, that maybe he would come up with some other ideas. He would be sensitive to what's there. This house will be a big change on the block, but it could and has the ability to be and the opportunity to be a wonderful change, because what's been there has been an anomaly, as the one across the street from it and the one to the left of it. And I didn't mean to make anyone who lives in those homes feel badly, but those are anomalies. This is an opportunity to bring more rhythm to that street and to really close that gap. So I would hope that we could look forward to seeing some alterations, some refinement to this that incorporated what you heard tonight as far as articulation. Yes.
Thank you. So I'll make a couple comments, and I'll look for someone to make a motion. I think the issues have been kind of well stated by my fellow commissioners. One of my favorite tools for looking at neighborhood compatibility is this, what is it called, the street elevation map, which is the streetscape, which is, it's sheet A8 on our plans, and it really just simplifies the forms of the homes, and you get to see how everything fits in. And this is where I struggled with the previous application. This is where I'm struggling with this application. And so when you see the form being so different, that's when you then go to the architectural details and the massing and the spacing to see how that could be mitigated. And I know for the last application, really articulating the front to not have that solid mass was an important issue that we talked a lot about, and that was a revision that came about because of these discussions, and I felt that was an important component of that design. So that's something that I'm getting hung up on. And secondly, in our residential design guidelines, a lot of weight is given to garages and parking and how you access the lots. I mean, that's part of the neighborhood compatibility, and I was a big fan of the access from the alley last time, and that's another change that, and I understand the rationale, and it makes perfect sense from a livability perspective, but we're trying to look at the land use patterns for what's best for the neighborhood. So those would be my two main issues. I think it's probably pretty close. I think there are some small changes hopefully that could be made that could mitigate some of these concerns. So that's those are my thoughts. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Hearing what is said, if I were the applicant, I'm not sure what I would do, because I respect what's said, and I can be very sympathetic to it, but if I were to go home and say, okay, here's what the commission did this evening, I would say they said you could do something, we don't know what it is, but then we might like it better, and we don't know what that is, so why don't you go try? And they can do that, but maybe if we could be a little more precise about what might be helpful, because that's pretty vague, and we've all sat through this lot for a long time, and at some point it looks like we're making things more difficult than they ought to be, and I'm not saying we are, but it would be very helpful if those who say they don't like this design, or that it's close but not quite there, personally I would be helped if people could be a little more precise. I mean, it may be something as simple as taking away the carport, which I think Commissioner Sayak, I think, would be happier with. That's a concrete suggestion. And if you two have other suggestions, I'm just inviting them. They would be helpful.
Well, based on my comment, the two things I would like to see would be that the more articulation, some setbacks in the front to give it more of a vertical appearance, and I would really love to see the access from the alley. Those would be the two. But again, I was trying to be vague so as to not design from up here, and just give general guidance. Mr. Talsfor?
And I would agree with what you have just said, because that's what I was going for, without wanting to get into the detail of what to do, and perhaps looking at the windows. I mean, I think that is really what sets off at front of a house, so to fit in.
So with that, does someone want to venture a motion?
All right. I would make the motion for 18 Palm Avenue Architecture and Site Application S-10-11 on the appeal to uphold the appeal of the Development Review Committee. Is that right? Am I saying this right? I'm doing this off.
So
grant the appeal.
Yeah.
Grant the appeal. To approve, to grant the appeal, to uphold the,
You grant the appeal, so you could
and asking that.
Continue it or remand it back to staff, or?
Okay, well, in fact, maybe we should talk about that as commissioners up here. Do we want to remand it?
Do we want to see this again, or do we think
yes.
do we think we've given enough guidance
Right.
that we could remand it back to the DRC?
Yeah, I'd like to know that before I
that's an
make
option,
this.
right?
Well, let me just say this. Since we know that the appellant was not satisfied with the DRC action and the DRC approved it the way it was, it might be to everybody's interest if we have it come back to us.
Okay.
It might remove one step. Now, that doesn't mean that at that point they couldn't appeal, I guess, because if it came back to us, I don't know. The council could tell us this. I would have assumed, and I don't even know if this is correct, that our action tonight would be final, because this would have been an appeal from staff action, and I don't know if you get 2 appeals or 1 appeal, but if it comes back to us and we make a decision, I guess the question I have is, wouldn't that be appealable? So there's really 2 questions there. Could you let us know?
Does staff want to respond?
If you continue this and it comes back and you make a decision, yes, that is an appealable decision. You have multiple options here. It could be remanded to DRC. You could require it to come back. That is at your discretion.
But I think probably the first question, though, tonight's action, let's assume that we were to say we're going to uphold the staff's decision. Is that an appealable order?
There's basically three options. Assuming the commission does not want to send it back to DRC, then you could either continue it directing the applicant to return to the commission with redesign based on your direction on those 2 items or whatever items. If that's the case, that's not a final decision of this commission. That's not appealable to the council. If, on the other hand, the motion is to grant the appeal in part and have it redesigned with those two elements, then that theoretically would be a final decision, could be appealed to council.
My question, forget that. Go back to tonight. Let us assume for the moment, which is not going to happen, we said, oh, the staff was right, so the appeal is denied. Then the appellant would have had a hearing from which there was an appeal, and there was a final decision on appeal. So my question is simple. Could they then appeal that decision? Okay, yes. So then there is no difference. So we're not, I'm suggesting that we have them come back to us, and we'll get rid of the middleman, so to speak, and then if there's an appeal, it will go directly to the council. I think that might make life simpler for the appellant and the applicant, and I would prefer it. So that's my suggestion.
I will take that direction. I would agree with that.
Okay, so are you gonna?
Yeah, I'll
we had
continue.
a motion started. So
okay, so here it is, and thank you, Tom, for that clarification. So where was I with this? We will uphold the appeal and
grant the appeal.
Grant the appeal. Uphold it, grant it. Grant the appeal and have this application continued and returned to the Planning Commission based on the direction of the comments that you heard from the Planning Commissioners, Chairman Bourgeois, Commissioner Sayoc, and Commissioner Talasvor. And and to a date certain, which we will come to in a minute. And I will cite that the residential design guidelines, do I need to cite them, or shall I just say yes, what?
Well, we're having a discussion over it, but if you do grant the appeal, that's taken action on the appeal, that would be appealable to the council in theory. I think what you're really saying is, I think you're saying you want to see the matter back before you.
Yes.
So I think we would agree the best thing to do is then continue this with direction the applicant to do redesign on this number of elements, returning to you. Then you'll make your final decision. That'll be appealed.
Okay, so the motion is that we will continue this to a date certain, okay? And we'll be looking for a redesign, refinement, modification based on the comments, once again, I'll say this, that you heard here tonight from Chairman Bourgeois, Commissioner Sayoc, and Commissioner Talasvor. Would that work for everybody? Okay. And to a date certain, that would be?
Do we have a date?
September 22nd.
September 22nd.
Do we need to ask the applicant if he could be back here by then?
Yeah, we're getting, for the record, we're getting nods that the applicant's okay with it. The appellant is not going to be present at that time. So, can we?
May I suggest that we take a brief recess so that the chair can consult with both sides and see if we can come out with something that is reasonable?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a brief 2-minute recess, see if we can come up with a date, and then we'll continue with the motion. Meeting back to order. I think we've agreed on a date of October 13th.
Okay.
So we have a motion, continue to a date certain, October 13th. Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm sorry, was there a second? Because I should.
No, not yet. Not yet. That's what I was asking for.
Is Commissioner Sayoc, I assume, would second that? I just, during the recess, I talked to the maker of the motion to make sure I fully understood it. And I understand it to mean to respond to the 3 comments that were made, or to respond in such a fashion that the applicant thinks it will otherwise satisfy the commission, in other words, take their own risk. It is not a direction to submit something that responds to those 3 issues only. Right. And I just want a clarification. That is the maker of the motion's intention, and the seconder agrees with that?
That is my intention. If I was not clear with that, it could be either responding to our comments or something new. Working with the neighbors would be a wonderful idea. We want you so welcomed in that neighborhood. Okay.
And I think I missed it. Did we actually get a second on that motion?
Yes.
Can I-
Commissioner Sapp.
Yes.
Oh,
I will
No,
now
she hadn't.
second it.
Okay, thank you. So, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of continuing the item to the 13th of October?
Aye.
Opposed? 0. Passes. The motion passes 4-0. And there are no appeal rights because it's continuance. So, that concludes item number 2. We have no continued other business, new other business. Do we have any report from community development?
Just wanted to let you know that the town council granted the appeal of the Union Avenue subdivision, and they approved one house that was on parcel 3, and they remanded the house on parcel 2 back to the planning commission for redesign.
And the house for the third lot had not been submitted, is that correct? Okay. Great. Yeah, Commissioner Sack?
Was there a decision made on whether that would be demolished or?
Yeah, they approved the demolition of the existing house, approved the 3-lot subdivision, and approved the architecture and site application for parcel 3. Remanded the architecture and site application for parcel 2. They did provide some direction to the applicant. They asked that the side setback be increased and that the height be reduced and the massing be reduced.
All right. Any other reports? Any commission matters? All right, seeing none, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.